Good morning, I'm Hannington Patrick Owere. I work with SEATINI, Uganda.
Morning, Ali Twaha, Vision Group.
Simon Octella, Vision Group.
Okay.
Good morning, ladies and gentlemen. My name is Redempta Chemtai from the Ministry of Water and Environment, Climate Change Department.
Welcome.
Morning, I'm Richard Okwatokelo from Ministry of Trade, Industry and Cooperatives.
Welcome, Ministry of Trade. Greetings to your PS.
Good morning, ladies and gentlemen. I'm Sherry Namita from the Ministry of Water and Environment.
Welcome, Ministry of Water. You could, for security reasons, we skip this one.
I'm Dr. Nicholas Muksa from the National Renewable Energy Platform.
Sorry? Please, National.
I'm Nicholas Muksa from NREP.
Hey, now you've removed from the full thing to an acronym, Doctor. Now you can say it, no problem.
From the National Renewable Energy Platform,
Okay.
NREP.
National Renewable Energy Platform. Again, for security reasons, I'll start from this end.
Morning, my name is Paul Bagao from the Natural Resource Governance Institute.
Good morning, colleagues. My name is Henry Bazira, and I work with the Water Governance Institute as the Executive Director.
Good morning, Kana Kudia Edwin Kavuma. I work with the Uganda Extractive Industries Transparency Initiative.
AITI. Welcome.
Morning, ladies and gentlemen. I'm Imam Mugisha. I work with resource rights as the natural resource economist.
Sarah Pendi, Member of Parliament and the Vice Chair of the African Parliamentary Network on Illicit Financial Flows and Tax Justice, Uganda chapter.
Welcome, welcome.
I haven't had Ministry of Energy here.
Yes. Ministry of Energy, are you in the house? They are on their way. And that's a very good observation because we need them here. So ladies and gentlemen, once again, we are gathered here today. They are calling it a high-level technical meeting. And the idea is that we are discussing technicalities of the African Mining Vision, which was launched in 2009. But ever since its launch, it was meant to be the pinpoint for, or the blueprint for all the rest of African countries on how to manage their mineral wealth or mineral resources or extractives. But ever since its launch, countries have taken different directions. Others have unilateral policies that are guiding the mineral sector, and they are thinking that theirs may be better than the one that was designed at the African level. We have seen also the emergence of other concepts, including energy transition, which could not have been thoughtfully included during the discussion of the vision. Now, countries seem to be at the crossroads to say, is the AMV still relevant for individual countries? Should countries consider their own particular visions and strategies for managing mineral wealth? Should there be carve-outs in terms of domestication, or it should be implemented wholesomely? There are also issues to do with emerging trends regarding the critical minerals, which are very important in the energy transition discussion. So that's why we are gathered here today. We want to create first of all, have a platform where we have technical personnel represented by you from different organizations, from civil society. We have independent think tanks. We have ministries. There are also issues to do with and I'm happy the Minister of Finance is here, the fiscal regimes for managing the extractive sector. Now, for Uganda in particular, we know we have been able to revise our Minerals Act of 2003, Mining Act, and we now have a Mining and Minerals Act of 2022, which is a comprehensive document and which is believed to be highly aligned to the African Mining Vision. But is that enough, or there's more to do? So today we want to delve into that discussion throughout the day and see how we can make some meaningful recommendations on how best we can domesticate the African mining visions to the peculiarities of Uganda without diluting it. Okay, this person asked me to stand at the podium, but I love to speak among these people. So I think it's for camera purposes. So colleagues, that's why we are here today. But before I go any further, I would like to welcome a representative from SEATINI, Uganda, to give us opening remarks and maybe set the context of this discussion beyond the pointers that I've given us. Welcome with me. If you could kindly give him a round of applause as he comes to address us. Thank you.
Thank you so much, moderator, Mr. Robert Suna, Honorable Sarah Opendi, distinguished participants, ladies and gentlemen, Mr. Richard Okot from Ministry of Trade, Industry and Cooperatives, Assistant Commissioner, External Trade, representative from EITI Uganda, representatives from Ministry of Finance, representatives from NREP, which we will know in deeper details. Distinguished ladies and gentlemen, good morning. My name is Kafero Habat. I work with the Southern and Eastern Africa Trade Information and Negotiations Institute, SEATINI, Uganda, as the programs manager. I bring you warm greetings from SEATINI Uganda's Executive Director, Ms. Jane Nalunga, who is somewhere else in another equally important engagement, but she sends her warm regards, and she's ably represented here. I would like to, first of all, welcome you to this high-level technical meeting on the domestication of the Africa mining vision. It's indeed a very timely and important discussion because of so many reasons, which I'll explain as part of my remarks. And having you all at this meeting is really very strategic for us and intentional, because at SEATINI, we've been undertaking various efforts towards assessing and interrogating the efficacy of various policy frameworks, especially the Africa Mining Vision, in view of whether it can contribute to promoting Africa's structural transformation, but also mineral beneficiation. And we've also been undertaking various efforts in view of promoting an Afrocentric, just and inclusive energy transition. And this engagement is linked to those efforts. So it's not a one-off, but part of our continuous efforts. And like I earlier hinted, this engagement is timely, especially in view of the climate crisis. And I cannot even emphasize the climate crisis, because we have all experienced it in our different walks of lives. And communities are bearing the brunt of the climate crisis. But also, the discussion is important in view of the long-standing challenges that we have been facing. The challenge of the trade deficit. We have sustained a trade deficit, not just as Uganda, but also as Africa. And the issues of indebtedness, our ends are not meeting, and we need the finances. And when we talk about why this meeting is timely, it's because of the fact that all those challenges are at play, and we need resources. But also, when Africa Mining Vision was adopted in 2009, as part of the broader Agenda 2063 of the African Union, there were things that were set, and focus was on changing the paradigm. And I will emphasize paradigm because for long, Africa has been locked at the lower end of the global value chain as an exporter of primary commodities. So as part of the efforts, African Union's efforts to change that paradigm, and contribute to promoting structural economic transformation, a number of policy frameworks were put forward, and the Africa Mining Vision is part of those policy frameworks. So the Africa Mining Vision is concerned with changing Africa, contributing to Africa's structural economic transformation. And it's part of Agenda 2063, the blueprint for Africa's quest for structural transformation. And when we talk about climate change, how it's intensifying, we also recognize that there is a scramble for critical minerals. And Africa has huge deposits of these critical minerals. So Africa is indeed at the center of the scramble. And so if we are not careful as African countries, including Uganda, the trend of exporting primary commodities is not going to change, because what the West wants, European countries, are raw materials to jumpstart the energy transition and also power their industries. And Africa has huge deposits of these minerals. So this is really a timely conversation, but also it's timely because this is the chance for Africa, it's a golden chance for Africa to leverage its minerals, critical minerals, to also achieve structural economic transformation. But also what structural economic transformation and industrialization comes with is job creation. The president of Uganda has been a number of times quoted on grounds of the fact that Uganda and other African countries export raw materials. And when we export raw materials, we export jobs. So that issue of exporting raw materials should end, because the more we export raw materials is the more we forego creating jobs. And is the more we export our jobs. So the need to add value to our minerals cannot be overemphasized. And in fact, Africa is losing approximately $100 billion due to lack of value addition on its minerals. So you can see how deep that challenge is. And Africa Development Bank has done a lot of research around the same, how much revenue we could generate if we add value to our minerals. And we have actually critical minerals that are needed for the energy transition, cobalt, manganese, among others. And also, the extractives oil mining sector alone, the amount of money that is lost to illicit financial flows from just the mining extractive sector alone is $40 billion. So there are a number of challenges that we need to address. And this is Africa's chance, Uganda's chance, to also achieve mineral beneficiation, because we're not benefiting from our minerals. A lot of our mineral wealth is exported in raw form. And if we don't change that trajectory of trade, we will wallow in poverty. And the trend of development will not change. And as all attention is on Africa, we see that other countries, all blocs like European Union, have already put in place policy frameworks and directives. They are dubbed, for example, there is the Carbon Border Adjustment Mechanism, which also has implications on African economies, because our industrialization, our industries use obsolete technology. We don't have technology that is up to standard. So it means the products that we put on the market are carbon intensive. So directives like all policy frameworks and measures like carbon border adjustment mechanisms are likely to affect African countries. But then we also look at SEATINI, we look at such measures as punitive measures, although they are in the guise of addressing climate change. Because we need, in fact, instead of looking at the EU Green Deal, we need, I think, a global Green Deal beyond the EU Green Deal. Because yes, we need to address climate change, but also when we look at the polluters, they are not paying for causing climate change because there are low levels of industrialization across a number of African countries. So with low levels of industrialization, it means we are not polluting. We are not contributing to that, pollution or release of greenhouse gas emissions. In fact, our contribution, some statistics indicate less than 4%, others less than 3%, so we are there. It's in fact a minimal contribution to the climate crisis, but we are paying the price because we are disproportionately affected by the climate crisis. But in view of our discussion today, the Africa Mining Vision is one of the progressive frameworks, but also given that it has a number of principles that would address some of our challenges, all that would help us achieve a number of things. There's limited domestication of the same and operationalization. Countries agreed that it's a good principle. It's a good principle. But the same countries that regarded the Africa Mining Vision as a good policy framework with all its good principles are the same countries that are not domesticating it and operationalizing it. So even when we talk about operationalizing the Africa Mining Vision, I think Africa Mining Vision was adopted in 2009 before we had a lot of momentum around the energy transition. And I think when we talk about domestication, we also need to interrogate, is it still fit for purpose? Should it be wholly adopted, operationalized, domesticated, or a number of principles can be pulled out from the Africa Mining Vision? And what are those principles? So there's a lot that we need to discuss today in view of the same, but also recognizing that Uganda has the Mining and Minerals Act. There are a number of policy frameworks, because at SEATINI we recognize existing efforts, but also interrogate whether they are fit for purpose and how we can build on the same to achieve the desired outcomes. But also the issue of regional value chains is important, because at SEATINI we've been advocating for a regional value chain approach, because even when you look at the mineral wealth that countries have, there's no single country that has, for example, all the minerals that are required for the energy transition ideals, for example, hydrogen batteries, among others. These minerals are spread across countries. Each country has just components and segments of these minerals. That's why the regional value chain is very important for us to undertake. Because if we undertake a regional value chain, we can pool resources and expertise. Pool resources and expertise both at the, for example, East African community level and at the continental level. But also with industrialization adding value to our minerals, we can be able to create jobs. And we can be able to address challenges of indebtedness, be able to achieve the resources that are needed to address climate change, among other challenges, unemployment, among others. So with those few words, allow me to wish all of us fruitful deliberations. And once again, I bring you greetings from SEATINI's Executive Director, Ms. Jane Alunga. Thank you so much.
Thank you so very much. Herbert from SEATINI, Uganda. I think that is that sets the ball rolling. Now, try to pass appreciate, without further ado, really pass appreciate where we are in terms of domestication. We are having Mr. Bagabo to take us through the current status in as far as Uganda's go in terms of domesticating the African Mining Vision. What are the challenges we faced? What's the progress, way forward, among others? And I think since we have EETI also in the room, that would be, he could make some good supplements on the same. Over to you, Mr. Bagabo. In the meantime, we have been joined by some people. You could introduce yourselves as Mr. Bagabo gets ready. Unfortunately, we may not be able to get us introduce ourselves to you because we did that already, but we are privileged to hear your name and where you work.
All right, hello everybody. Called Atkins Katsabe. I'm Member of Parliament representing the people of Ukonzo County West, Kasese District. Thank you.
Welcome. Come on, Honorable, welcome.
Thank you. Good morning. My name is Mathieu Tedu from Ministry of ESC Affairs. Thank you.
Welcome. Any other new person in the room? I think so far that's it.
Good, thanks. Morning, everybody. Yeah, my name is Paul Bagabo, and I work for the Natural Resource Governance Institute. In the interest of time, I'll not use this minute to do an advert for the Natural Resource Governance Institute, but we'll talk about it at some point. So today, I was asked to talk about, does this Africa Mining Vision fit? Can we use it to ensure that we utilize, we develop, we benefit from our mineral resources? And so I'm going to try and contextualize it in the context of Uganda, and then I'll make a few recommendations there. So I'll start here. So really, what we want is to benefit, and as Africa, I think the previous speakers told us, for a long time we were getting a raw deal, and so we needed to see how to benefit. And then we came up with the AMV, and maybe I'll talk a little bit about, is it fit for purpose? And then I'll finish with how to awaken this sleepy vision. Okay, so the key messages, in case everybody falls asleep when I'm halfway, I think you can take this away. One, the mineral sector creates opportunities in the era of energy transition. I've just heard that very clearly. The energy transition requires you to move from extractive industry, so the mining, to development industry, either through linkages, through diversification, or value addition. The path, as I said, should be based on linkages, value addition, and diversification. Regional coordination and regional cooperation is key. And then strong CSOs or stakeholders are required to make this thing happen. And then the private sector and government, they need a social license to operate for them to be successful. And then it's very important to ascertain what we have in the ground, because without knowing that, you can't enter into good deals. And at the Africa level, as we shall see, I think this was one of the big problems. And then, of course, environmental and social justice, adding gender and all these other things, I think are very important. And as we shall see, one of the success factors is taking into consideration issues around the environment, decommissioning, and social justice. So those are the key messages out of the presentation. I thought I'd bring them to allow us to think through them as I present. Okay. I'm not going to dwell much on this because I know very many people understand the Africa Mining Vision, especially here. What I will say briefly is currently there are some countries that are actually making use of it. And maybe the question would be, should Uganda do that? But basically, it's a paradigm shift. And what the African Union intended to do was to help African countries move away from this export of raw materials to diversification, to adding value, and to the benefit that accrues with that. And so I think that was the vision in 2009 that came up. The question would be, at that time, I think we're not very strong on oil and gas, and so many countries seem to have shifted to oil and gas, and so the Africa Mining Vision as a dream seems to have taken a back seat because countries, I think, have shifted to oil and gas. But mining, as we've heard, is really coming back because of the energy transition, but because also there is increased demand for the major minerals. Okay, so the AMV had tenets, it had pillars, and it had strategies. I'm sure we can read some more about these pillars and tenets, but I focused a lot on the tenets and then on the strategies. So most of them are the things that we really aspire, and it was set out very well. I think it was really, at that time, it was set to spur growth on the continent. So these aspirations and the tenets that were set out, I think were very, very critical, and they set the ball rolling for development of the mining sector on the continent. The mineral resource itself, as I said, understand how much you have in the ground so that you can strike good deals. Transformation of finite resource into long-term development. The use of comparative advantage, and we'll talk a little bit about this. Do you have it all? Do you have everything? If you don't have everything, how can you use what you have to create competitive advantage instead of trying to do everything at once? And then integrating mining into downstream, midstream, and upstream linkages, optimizing knowledge and technology transfer, and then the environment and good governance. There were 4 pillars, there were 9 clusters. Those are the strategies. The strategies really are coming straight from the tenets. But one of them, which was very important, is this mainstreaming the Africa mining vision into the country mining visions, what you'd call domestication, really. How do we move that downstairs, as we should say? And of course, there were some very important ones. Negotiate good deals, the capacity to, and the power. Develop infrastructure, both at a country and a regional level. Check illicit financial flows. I think we've talked a little bit about that. Critically important, because I think that's what continues to hurt us. And then this dominance of export of raw materials. The president has continued to talk about this. Unfortunately, it's only in directives. And the directives have failed to find their way into the legislation, both into the law, regulations, or operations. So that is where we have a problem. And maybe that's also the biggest problem with the vision. Then better resource management. We can see setting up national mining companies, setting up heritage funds, developing stabilization funds to ensure that future generations can also benefit from this resource. Those are some of the pillars that were set out there. And as I've said, the pillars and the clusters follow through from the tenets and strategies, and maybe in the interest of time, I skipped that, but we can really go back and read on those ones. Okay, so what was the implementation? And very quickly I'll say it was set out in 2009, I think we've been told that, and by 2012 we had really developed an Africa Mineral Development Center. We had established a guidebook. We had strengthened regional cooperation. We had increased at-sample production. And of course, we were trying very much to invest the profits at either country level or regional level. Maybe one thing that we can note is while the Africa Mineral Development Center was set up, it was only demand-driven. You needed to go and request for their support for them to come to your country. And many countries at that time, knowing very well that they were independent and had the technical capacity, many of them did not actually request for this support. I think basically around 4 or 5 countries requested for the support, including Botswana, Namibia, Mozambique, and I think Zimbabwe. So that's what happened, that Framework is good. It was there. The only challenge that happened was that the vehicle that was set up to drive the vision did not have this power and pressure to move ahead. And so as a result, it was in clusters and enclaves and so on. If you requested for them, then you got support. And I think that was a huge challenge. And we shall talk a little bit about this concept of enhancing regional cooperation, what actually happened. Okay, so to cut it down, I tried to use this SWOT, and I know many people, including SEATINI, love SWOT. Personally, I don't like it. But yeah, so I've tried to summarize the strength, the weaknesses, opportunities, and threats of the AMV in terms of the SWOT. But I should say that the dream of industrialization that was set out by the presidents in 2009 suffered one thing, that over the years we've seen that regionalism is falling apart. You know very well we started the ESC. ESC has failed to move beyond trade. We've not developed the other pillars of the ESC. And so with that, even in terms of the technical movement of ensuring that the AMV can work, suffered problems. Of course, we'll not talk to detail about the challenges we had with Uganda and Rwanda, Rwanda and South Sudan, Rwanda and Burundi, and Uganda and DRC. So those things start to affect the pillar, the base on which the AMV operates. Of course, ECOWAS recently, as you can hear, and these tensions have been rising, but more recently some countries decided to leave. But ECOWAS did not work out as well. SADC is working to a small extent, but on the whole, the Africa Continental Free Trade Area, the ESC and COMESA are not very effective as tools, and yet they were supposed to drive the vision at a regional level. And so we can talk a little bit about how we make the regional integration more robust, because it's the base. But what are the strengths? One, it had political legitimacy. So because many of the presidents and the countries adopted it. It was developmental in nature and touched on the core of the African continent, because we're getting a raw deal out of mineral production. It deals a lot with linkages and diversification, which really helps to move economies from poor to medium to rich. And so that is something that is also we can take advantage of. And then, of course, there were some provisions on environmental and social governance. And then it aligned the regional level with national aspirations through, as I've said, the Africa ADM. So what are the weaknesses? It's voluntary. While it was set up by the African Union, there wasn't so much enforcement. And it was not punitive. There were no penalties for you not to adopt it. And then it requires a lot of resources at a country level, at a regional level, because exploitation of minerals requires a lot of money. Just finding out how much you have and then developing the industry itself, I think, is very expensive. Minerals, just like any extractives, are susceptible to commodity prices. And so our dreams of making a huge money out of sale of commodities, I think could suffer somewhere because of volatility. And then there was a weak market in Africa at that point because of population, but we can argue whether that is an advantage or a disadvantage. And then the action plans were very weak on issues around women and gender. So they were not really robust. What are the opportunities? There's this all regionalism, the drive for a bigger market under the Africa Continental Free Trade Area. And then Africa actually had abundance of minerals, resources of different types. And then there is a potential that the minerals can help to finance energy transition or to finance a just energy transition. I think currently our cost is around 28 billion for energy transition. So there was a good opportunity that maybe as Uganda would be able to finance energy transition through there. And then what are the threats? Of course, we're depending very much on transitional minerals, but we have only about 28 years, maybe 26. Because after 2050, when most countries hit net zero, then the demand for minerals will go down. So during this time, we really have to benefit from it. And then the question would be, how would you want to benefit from it? What are the avenues that a country can try to do to domesticate the AMV? As you know, exploration alone takes about 4 or 5 years. And then from exploration, setting out the contracts and the development phase, another 7 years. And then when mining starts, it's about 7 years. So we're looking at 22 years to develop an industry. And so that was the challenge that Africa has. That because we have so little time, what strategic decision should we take? I know the president talks a lot about diversification, and we love it. But moving from the resource in the ground to an export of a finished product refined, I think right now we'll need 22 years. So those are some of the challenges. And those in the ministry can tell us really how we can shorten that time from exploration to setting out contracts and then to setting up a development structure. And then there's a lot of issues around capital and resources because there's a falling demand, there's a falling space market for capital for extractives of some nature. And then, of course, we are competing as Africa with other destinations. Latin America, for example, is rich in minerals, and we are competing for the same FDI. And so how do we structure our governance and our laws to ensure that we can attract investments? And then, because of this nationalism, as you know, the AMV was looking inward. That nationalism, I think, threatens FDI. Because many people from the outside the continent would feel, we'll be constrained if we invest in Africa. So we need to think about that as we domesticate. What aspects of the AMV do we take? Okay, so in Africa, what is the biggest work that we have to do right now to operationalize the AMV is invest in exploration. We don't know what we have. And so I think that is critically important. And that you can see Africa's spend, and you can see Australia, for example, spend on exploration. So we have a long way to go. How do we generate those resources to be able to discover how much we have? Of course, there are issues around gender. Not that I'm not sensitive, but I'm not going to dwell much on it because we've talked very much on issues around gender. But I'm sensitive. And then issues around gender roles and the mining sites. How do we uplift that? This just transition in the mining sector requires that the women rise up that rank in terms of where they are placed currently in the value chain, at the mine site itself. And then the pay gap also is still very far. And these are statistics that I try to get. I think there's need for looking at that if you are to operationalize the AMV. Okay, so there was a rethink. And everybody was like, okay, let's reset the AMV to fit into national aspirations. Yeah. First, a number of concerns were raised, especially around develop local content, address current barriers, develop an effective tax revenue management, and then manage environment and social issues. So if you're moving to domesticate, especially in light of the transitional minerals, but caution should be made here that when you push to drive transitional minerals, they're smaller in volume, their return is not very high, and so countries that are still focusing on major minerals as well, I think stand to gain more. Of course, in Uganda, as you can see, and DRC, we still depend on gold. And if it wasn't for capacity issues, I think even copper would still be a major export commodity. So you can see, and across the world, if you look at cobalt, if you look at tungsten, tin, and so on, the volumes are not as big. Maybe because they're not discoveries as yet, or we haven't ascertained how much we have, but also the return and the challenges around how you exploit them. Okay, so I thought we'd just now come back to Uganda. So that's the overview about AMV and the challenges, the SWOT, and so on, and we can discuss further. So what do we do? How do we domesticate? First, I think very important, the geology is very important. Currently, we don't know much about what we have in the ground. And so it's hard for you to estimate whether there's a potential or not, and whether it's worth to invest in this resource using the finances that we have, including the budget. And then we set out a mining law. I think the mining law is a good start. It is solid, and I've identified 3 or 4 things that are very critical about it. One, it set out a national mining company. Now, many of you will argue that it was a copy and paste, and they didn't paste special. You know, in copying and pasting, yeah, you need to paste special. So, otherwise, if you copy and paste, you take exactly what is in the oil and gas into mining. But I think the intention is very good. To set up a company to maximize the dreams of the AMV, so that we ensure that as a country, we can have a share directly of the mineral exploitation. Of course, it's not a foregone conclusion. It's very expensive to set up a national mining company and to finance it. Because once we set it up, we need to finance it. There are issues around equity sharing, there are issues around the production sharing arrangements in the law. And then, of course, there are issues around value addition. So I think our law is a very good start. And it's what we can use to domesticate the vision. And then, of course, the vision talked about artisanal mining. We've set out elaborate provisions in the law on artisanal mining to try and formalize them. The next stage is development of regulations, because that's very important, and that's the stage where the ministry is right now. It's very important to develop regulations which are solid and can implement the law. And we saw in the Public Finance Management Act in regard to oil and gas that they don't have regulations. And so this dream needs regulations to be able to implement the law and the policy. And then the fiscal regime. We currently, before we had a progressive fiscal regime, right now we have a regressive fiscal regime for the mining sector. And that's for major minerals currently. But I think that setting out a progressive fiscal regime, which ensures that small, high-cost miners can be supported to move up the value chain, is very important. And that can encourage both backward and forward linkages. And so that is there. It's not yet set up. And maybe the question is, should we set up a separate fiscal regime for mining? I think that's something we can discuss here. And then we have an industrialization policy and a law. Then we don't have it. Then we had it. Then we didn't have it. We're there. Mr. Court, I think, can help us. But yeah, how do we develop a solid, robust industrialization policy that can create a linkage with the mineral exploitation. And then a royalty regime to ensure that those people who are harmed by mineral production can get some money. But setting up a progressive royalty regime which enables companies as they start production to retain some money, and then you increase the royalty due as production increases, I think is critically important. So how do we set up such a regime in Uganda? In some countries, for example, Chile, I think, and Peru, they've done away with royalties in order to encourage companies to reinvest. But that's Chile and that's Peru. And for Uganda, since the Africa Mining Vision has this, do we pick it? Don't we pick it? If we do, how do we domesticate it? And then these no-go zones. You know, the other day I heard the people saying that the MPs should rise up because people are being chased away from these swamps and so on and so forth. When I'm not going to go there, but it relates very critically with mining. Because most of the minerals are in pristine, environments where there's wildlife or there's fauna or flora. And so the decision on whether we should mine in certain places or not mine in other places in the drive for development of the country, I think needs to be taken in a consultative way. And some countries, they say there are no-go zones. We did a study which recommended no-go zones, and we've got a lot of backlash, especially from governments, who argue in the quest for development, let us get a win-win. So, and in 2017, I did a small study on the Murchison Falls and Total and Uganda Wildlife Authority. And the study showed that actually you can get a win-win for both tourism and development of the resource. For mining, it might be a little bit different, depending on what methodology you use. And then, of course, transparency and accountability with the EITI. Mr. Kanakulia can help us there. So the AMV talked in length about this transparency and accountability. And then we followed that with the development of the EITI. Of course, there are other mechanisms for transparency and accountability that are there. The IFC has one. The ICGLR has one. And so which one do we pick? Which works best for us? So it wasn't laid out very well at the AMV level, but at least the principles are there, the strategies and the tenets. So once we want to domesticate the AMV into the domestic legal framework for exploitation, we need then to know which one to pick. I don't know how much time I have. Yeah? Okay, I'll try to move fast. So briefly, these are the entry points. If we want to move AMV to the domestic, we've started already anyway with a good legal framework. It needs tweaking here and there, but I think the mining law is robust. We are going into regulations. We need to ensure that they are robust. And then we need a fiscal regime, ensuring decommissioning and all that is in place, and supporting the national mining company to take a bigger piece of the cake. And so we can do these entry points depending on where we want to come in. Do we want to bring investors and we tax them? We ask them to transfer technology. We ask them to ring fence. Should we deal with minerals in general? Those are some of the decisions I think that we need to take in the domestication. And then we talked a little bit about environment. I'll conclude. So there is actually pressure. And there are expectations. Yeah? And then we have challenges. Yeah? That we want this AMV to be more inclusive. Yeah? And then to give us benefits at the same time. So how do we achieve those? And then we want to say, oh, we want these artisanal miners to feel like they're loved. But if you want to make money out of minerals, you have to produce at large scale. Yeah? So the AMV gave and took away at the same time. And so how do we remove some of the things, you know, and remain with a spine which is solid? And then, of course, there are issues about illicit financial flows, evasion, and so on. And I think that many of us are doing work around there. This is going to be an important topic for our work as we domesticate. How do we strengthen those systems? Okay. I'll end with a few recommendations. So when I say partner states, I also say the country level. Yeah. So one, important to understand how much we have. Without that, we can't get good deals, we can't model the future, we can't know what we can get, and then plan with it. And then mechanisms. Yeah? These structures need to align with the regional level and the aspirations of the AMV. And then seize this race to the bottom. And then create national action plans. Now, our national action plans, I think we have started. How solid are they? Our regulations have been divided into 6 parts. Strategically, I think it's a good thing. But when you have 6 different regulations, it helps you when you want to revise them. But creating coherence, I think, becomes very, very hard. So you start working in silos. And we've seen that for our extractive sector, the Ministry of Finance, the Ministry of Energy, the Ministry of Water and Environment, NEMA, I think are working in silos. We don't have a mechanism through which all these can work together. And we could discuss about a number of issues. We have an environmental fund, and the Ministry of Finance controls it, but it says it's owned by the Ministry of Energy. Water? Yeah? No. Environmental fund. Yeah. Yeah. It's Ministry of Water, but it's in the Ministry of Finance. And so we don't know how it's being managed. We have a climate finance unit coming up, and we're going to generate resources. Where should it sit? So those are some of the questions. And of course, to set progressive fiscal regimes, we've talked to a great length about it. This is just a demonstration using our what we used to call the resource governance index. We plotted governance and structures against growth and development. For CSOs, I think it's important to help government by focusing more on these impacts and ensuring there's justice in the transition and the exploitation of minerals. Monitor compliance of companies, and then work with these regional bodies on issues around illicit financial flows. For the private sector, ensure that rights are respected, mitigate tax evasion, publish information on contracts and payments, transfer technology, and then provide environmental and social sustainability through ESGs. And then finally, provide some money to us for decommissioning. Now, to be honest with you, taxation is the best route. I'm not saying that you should domesticate only that one, because there are other benefits that could accrue, and we've done a study on the refinery, and we've seen that actually, you can put a weight on other benefits more than the finance. But if you want to get money, and if money is your objective, I think you go this route. And then we've discussed a little bit about no-go zones. We did a study which recommended this, and then we got backlash. We are working a little bit on this win-win. And maybe this workshop can help us to refine our thinking on these no-go zones. So I will end with two questions. The first one is this one. How do we advance transitional mineral governance, and how should we as CSOs play a part? And then the second is existing structures within the energy transition framework that can ensure participation and this inclusiveness. So I'll stop here and thank you very much.
A round of applause for Ndugu Bagabo. I think that was very, very comprehensive. And I particularly want to thank you for making rather complex subjects appear a little simple, that even a person who is not into this space can pick a take home. We have heard from the technical aspects of this discussion. The next session is largely open to the audience. It may not necessarily be questions or comments, but from the presentation has given us setting the context, giving the challenges, providing a SWOT analysis, issues to do with how easy is it to domesticate the African mining vision and whether we should domesticate it wholly, that have been conducted across board to defend certain positions. He gave recommendations to civil society, government, and the rest of us. But also importantly, he mentioned some actors within the system that can assist us benefit from our minerals. And then the most intriguing question, which I see come out from his discussion, is whether we need a separate governance framework for the traditional minerals vis-a-vis the transition ones, or we need the one that can accommodate both of them, especially when you are discussing energy transition in that aspect. So without further ado, by virtue of your technical capacities in the room, I will take on some members that will give commentary on this, and then I will open up the discussion to other members of the audience. And if you allow me, I will start with Ndugu Kanakulia from the Extractive Initiative, Extractive Industries Transparency Initiative, to give us his views on this discussion. Please. Okay.
Thank you very much, moderator. Kanakulia Edwin Kavuma, as I'd introduced myself, from the EITI Secretariat. Thank you, Dr. Paul, for that presentation. And my comments to the topic and the theme of the day, I think, just like Dr. Bagabo has said, there has been a number of principles that have been already captured in our laws. When you talk of the new Mining and Minerals Act, it is very big on transparency. And we see that the Africa Mining Vision puts transparency at the forefront. The government's decision, by cabinet to join EITI is another step that shows that as a country we are moving towards transparency, and we take the matters of transparency in the sector very, very, very important. The mining vision, Dr. Paul didn't want to go so much into gender, but also has aspects to do with gender. And when we have discussions about gender, I usually give an example of and the role of ladies or women in the sector. When you look at our sector, the minister, her first name is Ruth. The state minister for minerals, her first name is Fiona. The commissioner mines, Her first name is Irene. No, so the PS. Her first name is Irene. Commissioner Mines, Agnes. Assistant Commissioner Geoscience, Grace. So, at the role of women at that high level for the country can't be doubted. It is critical because they are at the level of policy, which now feeds into now the other aspects of the legal framework and the sector. So I think we may not say that we have domesticated, but you might find that through the practice and the current legal framework, a number of issues African mining vision have been captured. So now the question comes, do we need to undertake some kind of analysis of the legal framework, legal and institutional framework, to see how far it has captured these principles of the Africa mining vision? And then now, when we measure that, the extent, we can discuss, do we need direct domestication, or we can just improve on the current legal framework or institutional framework in order to cater for these principles. The other thing is the time. The Africa mining vision came up in 2009. 15 years later, 2024, do we need to assess and see whether, of course, issues of transparency, there's no timeline. There are some principles that, have no timeline, but as the entire vision, do we need to also review it and see whether it speaks to the current circumstances and situation? We may find that many countries have improved their legal framework, their institutional framework, and are actually practicing or having a sector that is more up to date than the AMV. And maybe the AMV might need to also be reviewed to capture this. So I agree with Dr. Paul. As a country, we have done a lot to see that we move towards the AMV, much as, we haven't maybe ratified it. But the key recommendation I would give here is an assessment of our current legal and institutional framework to see the extent to which it captures these principles. Thank you.
Thank you very much. Those are views from EITI. My brother Bazira has a commentary also to make on the same. Natural Resource Governance Institute. Water Governance Institute.
Hello, thank you, moderator. I also want to add my voice to what Dr. Paul Bagabo has just said. And I'll be raising questions that we need to think about as we discuss the African mining vision. Kana Kulia has just told us that actually the African mining vision is now 15 years old since its drafting. And 15 years is a long time. The vision needs to be visited to see whether it is still relevant with the current state of affairs. So I think that I agree with his submission, saying that we need to review to see the relevance of the African mining vision in the current context, and also to assess Uganda's fitness to what we have been having as the African mining vision. Having said that, I would like us to think about the polluter pays principle. This is an internationally accepted practice. And I'm bringing this from the context of climate change and how we think that the polluter pays principle has been undermined at all international gatherings, including the COP, because the COP is one place where I would have expected a negotiation that companies or countries that are polluting more are paying for their pollution. But what we are saying is they don't want to pay for the pollution, and they don't want to give you money as grants for those who are suffering from the effects of climate change. They are instead giving you even the climate finance in terms of loans, yeah? And they are pushing for equity to promote businesses, many of which usually come from their jurisdiction, the developed country jurisdictions. So the mindset around climate change is not about, in my opinion, is not entirely about solving our problems as Africa who are suffering from the climate change effects, but to continue to keep the money in the developed countries and to keep the money moving, the assets and revenues moving up to the north. The other point I want to talk about that is important is the carbon border adjustment. This is a new concept that is coming up, and the mind behind the carbon border adjustment is that they want to reduce the amount of money that you'll be benefiting from as a country. In other words, Kenya, Uganda, in other words, you're going to adjust the carbon emissions on the basis of the country's borders. And that may have a problem in the sense that if you are going to have, for example, East African region in a particular block, and you are saying that for the East African region, this is the amount of, this is the price you're going to pay for the carbon that is coming from there, then there's going to be inequality that is going to be introduced there. The other bit that I want to also talk about is the EU Partnership Agreement. This is something new that is being pushed around, a move away from the ACP, African, Caribbean, and Pacific countries arrangement. This is to isolate countries that are in these partnerships and making it still problematic to access European markets. That's what I can talk about on that. The other question I want to ask us, and probably keep at the back of our minds as we have these discussions, and it's something that I have always had issues, even with my colleague here, Dr. Paul Bagabo, is the issue of foreign direct investment. Is FDI the solution for Africa? Or do we need to look at a completely different arrangement or mix of FDI versus domestic direct investment? When you set up a national mining company, how do you raise resources for the national mining company? Do you want to go looking for money from outside to finance your national mining company? Or do you want to look for money from within to finance the national mining company so that the national mining company is at a competitive edge in respect to the multinational corporations that want to come into this place? Do you want to see a national mining company that is going to go into mining sector and is carried forward like we are suffering with the petroleum sector? They carry you forward, and your negotiating power is limited by that virtue. Something else I need to watch out for as we discuss this is the concept of conflict, they call them conflict minerals, but I prefer to call them, because minerals are not in conflict. It is the people that are in conflict. So I prefer to call them minerals around or associated with conflicts in Africa. We need to look at the conflicts. Why are they where they are? And why do they seem to persist? And where is this looting or smuggling of minerals or mineral trafficking actually happening? If you look at the context for Africa, much of the mineral trafficking is happening around areas that have conflicts. And if you look at the players in the areas that have conflicts with minerals, you find international players actually in those areas. So that's something that we need to look at as we discuss this. My other important thing that I really hold very dear in this whole discussion is the landowners. We copied a practice that was proposed to us by the World Bank and the IMF of compensation and resettlement. That context, it does not respect the landowners. If you go elsewhere in the world, landowners have equity in the investments. To the US, for example, you find somebody with a drilling rig at the back of his compound, and he has interests that come from that drilling rig. He has equity in the drilling rig. So, but we have developed adopted a concept from the World Bank and IMF that says, compensate your people, get them off the land, let the investor come in. That is really unfair, because we all know that land is capital. You take it to the bank and you can get a loan. So I really want to see, as we structure our context, the landowners moving away from the compensation and resettlement. This compensation and resettlement should just be something that you are doing for disturbing somebody's peace. I am happy what we have achieved in the Mining Act, especially in respect to artisans, medium and large-scale miners in Uganda. For me, that is a very good starting point, because these artisans are actually the pathfinders of where the minerals are. Even in the absence of geological survey data, the artisans are a good resource to direct you where the concentration of the minerals are. The issue of illicit financial flows, I think we need to relate it to the financial architecture that we have, the international financial architecture that we have, because it is designed to make sure that resources and assets in the developing world are actually taken out of that developing world, together with the jobs that were mentioned earlier. So that's something that we need to look at. Then on the side of civil society, which is where I belong, we need to learn to track revenues. We should not just always focus about just transparency, accountability, that kind of advocacy. We need to up our game and track revenues. The other bit that we need to do is to also track compliance of both government and companies. And I'm glad to be associated with the Extractive Industries Transparency Initiative group for Uganda, where I'm a member of that group. And I think that is a think tank that is helping Uganda to understand better the sector. Thank you, moderator.
Thank you very much for those comprehensive submission. You'll allow me to hear from Ministry of Trade, and I can get back to you. Honorable Christine, you're welcome. Mr. Robert Riachira, I've seen you also. We may get some feedback from you, from activist side. Over to you, Mr. Okot.
Yeah, thank you very much, moderator. Let me also extend the same thanks to SEATINI for once again key exports that constitute the mineral exports. It's gold, cobalt, mainly, those are the two. But from the industrial aspect of the mineral sector, the industrial sector contributes 27.6% to our GDP. But then when you look at the mineral aspect, it is only 2% contribution. And yet this is a sector with a very huge potential and high growth sector. But little is being done in terms of extracting and making them useful for our development aspiration as a country. The main export destination of our minerals are about 5. The number one is actually United Arab Emirates, where we export about 1.19 billion of US dollars. It's number one. And number 2 is India. Number 3 is Hong Kong, then followed by South Korea and USA. But when you look at the mineral exports from those countries, they are almost tripling what we get out of our export. It's because of value addition. South Korea, using artisans and other small-scale manufacturers or processors, export huge quantities of processed minerals, gold, diamonds, name it. And they export small values, like necklaces, earrings, those rings and the rest. Huge quantity, but we have the potential to do it. That can enable us undertake processing of those minerals. We don't have the right long-term access to. In terms of domestication of the African mineral vision, There are guidelines that has been developed to enable countries to do that. But 10 years down the road, a lot has already happened in between, and perhaps we need a review of that document. Secondly, where has this domestication been done than those countries that have domesticated them? How successful has that been? As Uganda, I think we need to undertake our own assessment that actually are relevant to us as a country. That actually are relevant to us as a country. Not all of them is going to be relevant. But I think in terms of policies, legal framework, we have at the moment adequate, unless there are gaps, in terms of environmental and social issues that are key emerging aspects within the mineral sector. But like my colleague, the previous speaker, stated, we need to see how we manage the political economy of the extractive minerals in Africa. Perhaps the violence that are happening in certain pockets within the continent is perhaps because of the global political economy and the interest that they have within those key areas where huge potential for mineral exists. I think he mentioned DRC Congo, he mentioned West Africa. Those are the hotspots where we have those. So perhaps we need to understand better whether it is the interest for oil, the interest for those extractive minerals that is creating those violence, or it is those violence that is actually creating the exploitation of those, unfair exploitation of those minerals that we have in those. But above all, like the predecessor also stated, there are new developments taking place within the global arena, where we have fragmentation and perhaps exploitation of certain we have, so that we don't export raw materials, but we have them processed using the regional value chain and they're exported. And I think in Uganda at the moment, some of you are aware that we're exporting some iron ore to Kenya for further development and then exported outside. And I think that kind of arrangement perhaps brings in and bridges the gap where technology is a challenge, where skills is a challenge, and then we see how best we can exploit what exists within the region. EAC, I think there's a lot of work going on. There are quite a lot of strategies and papers that have been done to see how best we can develop as a region in advancing our extractive sector. But I think all in all, what we need to do as a country, I think the president has been saying it time and again, we need to add value. We need to add value. But we now need to look at those aspects that can lead us into adding value. That is what matters much at the moment. Thank you very much.
Thank you so much, Mr. Richard Okoth, for sharing those insights. I think he's raising very many critical points. For example, there are prerequisites for us to add value to process our minerals, and skills and capacity building are part of those prerequisites. But he also called us to be alive to the political economy around the extractives industry, which is very important. In fact, I wanted to raise an issue around the Africa mining vision. If it's well appreciated as a good policy framework by even the West, not just African countries, why are they not supporting it? Why are they still coming to Africa for raw materials? So I think we also need to interrogate the geopolitical dynamics around the same. But also going as a region, the AU just concluded the AU mid-term coordination meeting. There's the AU meeting that has been concluded. That meeting that has been concluded has raised a number of issues. The weakening regional economic communities, because regional economic communities such as the ESC are weakening because of a number of challenges. We've already hinted on the fact that there is a lot of focus on trade in the ESC as opposed to other critical aspects. So how then do we make the regional economic communities functional? and what needs to be done in order to achieve regional value chains. So I think those are critical issues, but we can interrogate them further. I would like to hand over the microphone to first Imam from Resource Rights Africa. You had raised, I think, all right, thank you.
Thank you very much. My name is Pros Chikavi. I'm from Uganda Investment Authority. I generally want to appreciate this conversation and appreciate our consultants for enlightening us about many areas. Because, as already indicated, minerals is the next oil and gas. And it has a very, very big potential, as already mentioned. And at the Investment Authority, we have the Presidential Investors Roundtable, where we are now beginning the 7th phase. And minerals is one of the sectors that we have highlighted. And so most of the points that have been pointed out really give us the beginning, the base to discuss. Because usually we are constrained, limiting the discussion to what our investors have to advise us, and yet it leaves out most of the critical areas that, you know, support the entire framework. But I'm also really tickled by the regional approach, because when you look at our neighbor DRC, that's where major critical minerals are found. But as Uganda, seated here close to them, having various cooperation agreements with them, how do we tap into that potential? China is already ahead of us. Some other African countries which are in West Africa already ahead of us with clear positions on how they are tapping into the value chain. So as Uganda, how do we tap into that value chain and see that we do not lose on that big potential that is around the corner? So I think this is a very good beginning, and it can take us afar. I pray that SEATINI can help bring on board the consultants on the PRT to help us come up with clear recommendation. Maybe to talk further about the PRT, it's a presidential initiative where the investors voluntarily advise the president on how best the investment climate can be improved. Because of its voluntary nature, we may not get the likes of Dr. Paul to voluntarily support. So maybe SEATINI, if you can come on board and bring us Dr. Paul and the other important members here to help us come up with very good product to front before the president. Thank you very much.
Thank you very much. I think Dr. Bagabo may not comment on that, but I think he's open to such an arrangement. Who was next to speak? Mr. Imam. You speak, Madam Wallace.
Thank you, moderator, and our
we are almost winding up, so
our facilitator for doing justice, to this discussion. I'll begin with the last question. Mr. Bagabo asked, "How do we advance, the transitional minerals?" And to me, I think the point from that gentleman, managing of the political economy, is very key, but also the issue of illicit financial, flows is also, because he mentioned the point that taxation is the how we can really immediately benefit from these minerals. But one key issue is tax avoidance, and that is, a key point on illicit financial flows. I read an article on Zambian mineral traceability system, how it recovered billions of money that was lost in, illicit financial flows. And I see really that coming to Uganda in Uganda's gold sector, and that could be one area we can really leverage. But also he talks about how after the countries have hit net zero by 2050, how the minerals are going to lose value, and benchmarking on Uganda during our COP28, how we launched our energy transition plan, which wasn't even, it didn't take in our inputs. Remember, it was by international energy agents, and I'm not sure whether everyone here in this room was really consulted. It takes us to 2065, net zero to 2065. Now, I'm imagining an exploration, you discover minerals in that gap. It beats the rest to the bottom he was really talking about. But also a point on, pressure to signing unfair mining deals. It is very key in this whole discussion. You all remember, a discussion on Energy Charter Treaty, how we are forced to sign. Of course, members were not sure of the, what is embedded in this Energy Charter Treaty. But one zombie clause talked about, 10 years if you assent to it. It takes over 10 years to withdraw. Now you can imagine if you then take time to study what is within that, treaty, but you assent and takes you 10 years. Imagine a clause like contributing a share of your mineral revenue to the, other countries. So really we could do well in managing these revenues, because one of the questions he really mentioned was, should we really prioritize mineral development or mineral management? To me, mineral revenue management is very key, because if you discover more resources, one key point to front is mineral revenue management. Of course, the issues of royalty sharing mechanisms and illicit financial flows, managing those aspects would really drive us into where we want to be under the AMV. Those are my few submissions.
Thank you. But he also, talking about revenue, he gave a comment that our fiscal regime is shifting from being regressive to being progressive to being regressive for the mining sector. And I think that is a point that our colleagues from finance can will give a comment where possible. Let us hear from Honorable Sarah Open. She has been instrumental in this sector, that's one, but also being a member of the UPNIFT Ugandan chapter, she could add more insights on the issue of illicit financial flows.
Yeah, thank you very much, moderator. I want to appreciate the presenter for his insights on this, the Africa mining vision, a vision that was adopted by the heads of state way back in 2009. And this vision, to me, was a welcome one, because we are all aware that Africa is well endowed with the mineral resources, but unfortunately, despite that, we still wallow in poverty. And it's a shame even that the people that pick the resources from us are the ones that give us aid, are the ones that lend us the money, and give us grants, yet we have the resources that we could actually use to better our lives as not just Ugandans, but Africans as a whole. And the Minerals and Mining Act, I strongly believe, is quite detailed enough. And looking at the Africa vision, the mining vision, I think most of the issues therein were actually taken care of in this Mining Act. And maybe I may only ask, if you closely analyzed the Mining Act and this Africa mining vision, what did we not take care of? Because I believe that we did a good job. I'm happy to have been the driver behind that bill before I left the sector. And I think when you critically look at some of the challenges in the sector, it is basically despite having this law now in place, the challenge is majorly enforcement of our own laws, of this Mining Act. I was surprised that the regulations actually not yet in place. I don't know, I was trying to check. I have not seen any online. Maybe they are there. Only one set. Yes, I don't seem to see a holistic document on the regulations, and that is work for me now, a question to ask the minister. But that said, I think the law in its current form can still be implemented. We still see a lot of illegal mining going on in the country. And when you were talking about the women who are not, you know, benefiting from this sector, it is partially because of that. Because when you go into most of these illegal mines, I want to call them illegal because most of them actually do not have licenses. If you went to places of Kasanda, Buweju, people are doing mining. And of course, the fact that it is actually manual systems being used, the women cannot do some of these things. You know, for example, the gold mines where they have to go underground, it's very dangerous for a woman to get down there. So this is why you see that the women are actually doing the small petty, you know, tasks around the mines. And that's why, of course, what we earn out of that is low. And of course, even when you get into the highly skilled mines, like the one we have in Busia, you may find that the women do not have that technical, few have the technical capacity to be engaged. But the Act provides for local content. The Act actually encourages the miners to, as much as possible, utilize local labor, but also involve the local communities. The Act also provides for, you know, partnerships between the foreigners who actually have the technology and the resources and the local people. And some have actually gone into these joint ventures, though at a low scale. And of course, therefore, you know, having the other issue that I also picked, why women are paid less, you know, it's very unfortunate that it still goes on, because you mentioned that even for the same job, you still find that there isn't equity. So I think the issue of equal pay for equal work needs to be encouraged, although I'm quite aware that there is supposed to be a framework for gender mainstreaming in this mining sector, and it's clearly in the Act. The other issue, I think we need as a country, I want to agree with you, we may not know how much in terms of quantity, how much gold reserves do we have. I don't know whether they now have that statistic, because it was work in progress before I left the sector. The area surveying has taken place. We actually know what minerals we have where, in which part of the country, but we may not know the quantities as yet. If that has been done, I really appreciate. And that's why I was asking, where is the Ministry of Energy? I don't know if they have come in now. They would actually add value to this conversation this morning. And I think my last issue is on the challenge that we have as a country. You know, every time I hear my president talking about gold being the leading earner, foreign exchange earner currently, I keep asking, whose money is it? Is it our money? It's actually not. And of course, you've had these conflicts that we've been having. I think they're even in court now. The taxing of the gold exports. Because the argument is that the gold that is being exported is only gold brought here to the refineries and exported. But how are you going to differentiate the gold that has been brought in from other countries, say DRC, and that one mined here? I think there is still a loophole there that people can actually, they're actually using to export our gold, and at the expense of the ordinary, at the expense of the country generally, because this revenue would go into the consolidated fund and help us to do something. So I think there is need to streamline that area. That is where there is a gap and a flow. And you know it is difficult to catch them. But the other thing that I think this is work in progress, the sector, the mining sector, the department actually needs more resources so that it can be able to do its oversight work over the existing mines. Currently, the staffing there are very few. So they need adequate resources to monitor all these mines, which they don't have. We had actually even proposed to have regional offices that would, you know, with staff to actually handle, you know, particular regions where mining is actually going on. So unless we actually properly resource these departments, we're actually going to continue losing revenue and taxing the ordinary person. Yet we have this window, God-given resource, where we would actually be receiving adequate resources. Otherwise, the environmental challenges still remain, and it's very sad. Those of you who have not moved around the country where mining is going on, people are destroying the environment and leaving the places without doing anything. Somebody does mining, you find all these places dug up and left the way they are, despite the law stating that you must actually restore, put back the soils where they should be. So otherwise, for me, I think I want to thank you all, but the key issue is we have a good law. The implementation remains the challenge. So, I had left out one issue. I think the challenge of value addition. We must also be alive to the fact that not all the minerals in this country, have, you cannot add value to everything, because there are certain minerals that require other minerals to be imported to actually add value to them. But also the quantities in the country are so minimal that even when the president issued the presidential directive banning export of minerals, all kinds of minerals, we opened an avenue for people to actually smuggle our tin to Rwanda. And no wonder Rwanda became the leading exporter of tin. Yet they don't have as much reserves as we do. So I think in trying to put an end to the export of minerals, we must also be, alive to that fact that not everything you can't put a ban on all the minerals. There must be exceptions to that rule. And of course, while there are presidential directives, they are also selectively sometimes handled. they are selectively handled. So I think, as you did say, maybe this needs to be anchored in some policy or law other than just directives. Otherwise, thank you very much.
Thank you very much, Honorable Sarope. That's very important. But to buttress your point, I think the issue of transparency remains very key. When Mr. Bagabo says that we may not even be aware of our mineral potential, is it an issue of capacity, that we don't have enough geological scientists, or is it an issue of opaqueness around the sector? Because I'm aware that some of the key causes of land conflicts in areas where such minerals are discovered is that some people tend to have, they are privy to information that actually there will be a mineral here, or there is a mineral here, before the entire public knows. So they venture into that land, and next thing you know, we see land grabbing. So we need to interrogate that. Is it a transparency issue or a capacity issue when it comes to discovery of those minerals? Again on transparency issue, economists like me are looking around, estimating how much revenue could have been lost at the time when there was, when they stopped the gold export levy, the levy on unprocessed gold. And surprisingly, there was no data during those years. You could look around all the credible sources, including the big Bank of Uganda website, and it was difficult for you to establish during that period when the levy was not working, what was the volume of unprocessed gold exports, and you could not find. So it got surprising for us to see a court decision telling URA to go and enforce retrospective on the exporters of gold. So we're like, what evidence was used to estimate, for instance, the revenue in terms of assessment by the URA? So again, the issue of transparency comes into play. I will wish to hear from Honorable Christine Kaya, if you could give your commentary on the same, and then we'll go to Robert. Okay.
Thank you so much. Somehow it is unfortunate that we are far way behind. If the states representatives during the AU meeting took part in 2009, now we are in 2024. We do not have regulations, and we are thinking of the domestication in 2024. I think we are far. But I request that maybe some of these reports shared with our representatives in the Pan-African Parliament, because I know they are very active these days. So when you look at the provisions of the AMV, African Mining Vision, even for them, they think that, for example, we have actualized all taxes. And yet Uganda, from what he has just said, we have not even actualized the taxes. And then they also presuppose that we have spent the incomes from mining well. We are not there, because we have even failed to incorporate the transparency provisions. So the vision thought that at least those are covered, but for Uganda we have not yet covered even the presupposed provisions. So when they say that, but we would like to integrate mining much into development policies at local, national, so, and mind about the workers, we are talking about the workers and the environment, and currently the minimum wage is still our challenge. The employment issues are still challenges. Most of the investors use their terms and conditions as they do mining in Uganda. So the rights of the workers, but also the environment is not okay. Leave alone the working environment, but also the environment outside the mining activities, as far as climate change management is concerned, is not okay. So there are issues to think about, members. One, who is the focal office for following up the domestication of AMV in Uganda? I would like to know, because even for other issues, we have always had focal people who give us, updates, but we cannot leave this to probably investment authority, or we have to decide. So that one is homework for us to agree with the line departments to have a focal point for this AMV implementation, but also reporting. And then the environment and impact assessments are being done, and people are freed, accepted to mine. But monitoring adherence to standards is a big challenge in Uganda. Who is following up with them? The other time I was discussing with the Wakiso District Environment Officer, and he told me he has limited access to these activities. He is not allowed to see what is happening inside, here, there. Of recent, I just saw Professor Baliba Sekabu Kenya trying to enter, but because he just came with a lot of defense forces, probably that is how he managed to enter. But monitoring adherence and giving us reports on updates is still missing. And then Can we have a national status report on how far we have domesticated? Like we have been monitoring our domestication on CEDAW, Convention on Elimination of Discrimination Against Women, and also these other provisions under climate change management, United Nations Framework Convention on Climate Change. How far we need to see, and then probably SEATINI would also give us a brief on, because we are mandated to integrate mining in the industry, in the industry and the trade sector. So we would like to see, is there a gap? Can we know that gap of how mining is missing in our industry and the trade sector, such that when we are also supporting the formulation of these regulations, we know how to, incorporate some of these issues. So the same applies to the local content issues. The other time I shared with you, one time we were subjected to look at a mining contract, and the contract, you're supposed to go to the speaker's office. Don't go with a pen, don't go with a paper, don't go with a phone. You may photograph or scan. You're supposed to read and cram whatever you can cram. But you know those contracts, the way they can be of very big volumes. So the issue of local content, as in employment provisions, but also the use of local inputs, is still a challenge. Even when we have commendable inputs, there is a way they play us out, and what we have looks of poor quality, yet we believe we have best natural resources here. So those are some of the insights I have, but would be happy to get responses, especially on the national level, domestication, how far, and then coming up with a center that can help us go on with this discussion from here. Thank you.
Thank you. So we shall have Robert, then Honorable Tinkson, and then have Ministry of Finance, and SEATINI Uganda. We should be closing the remaining minutes. Maybe the consultant will also have final comments regarding the panel plenary discussions.
Okay,
How about you, Robert?
Thank you so much, moderator. Maybe to bring to your attention, the Honorable Sarah Pendi was asking about the Ministry of Energy, and I can see my very good friend, Dr. Nicholas, is here. Maybe we'll give him an opportunity to clarify on the issues of the ministry. I bring you greetings from Nairobi, where we were trying to push. You introduced me as an activist. As environmental rights defenders across the region, we are pushing for the enactment of the East African Climate Change Act. As you may be aware, we have the East African Climate Change Policy, and we think that we need to harmonize our efforts across the region in issues of climate response. And of course, the East African Legislative Assembly has a committee on climate change, which is chaired by our very own, the Honorable Jacqueline Amongin, and we think we can leverage that assembly to try and have a common position. Of course, you are aware that at some point the East African community had come up with the East African Natural Resource Protocol, but along the way, Tanzania did not sign it. So in light of the Africa Mining Vision, you see that we need to harmonize. And of course, Dr. Bagabo raised the issue of the legal and institutional framework across the region in light of the Africa Mining Vision. And from an activist angle, I think the issue really is, as Imam said about the Uganda's energy transition plan of 2065, we know that we have, Africa is also running the Africa Agenda 2063, but when you read the Africa Mining Vision, in light of the Africa Agenda 2063, you said the two don't move in the same direction. I think because one came before the other, but I think we need to make sure that as Africa and also at East African level, we need to harmonize some of these issues, especially from a regional perspective. Of course, the other issue is also is that the East African Treaty is there's an ongoing process to amend it, especially looking at Article 6 and Article 7 to try and see that bring in, for example, like you're aware that traditionally we had 5, now we have DRC coming on board, Somalia, South Sudan, Ethiopia recently applied together with Egypt, the Djibouti to be a part of the community. So at the East African level, you realize that we don't seem to actually have a common position as far as the East African mining approach is concerned. But of course, from the Gen Z approach, because Paul Bagabo was very careful not to diving into gender issues, especially from the women perspective. But I want to also bring it at the angle of the Gen Zs, the young people, the youth, because the Africa Mining Vision was futuristic in its construction. You know that in Uganda, we have the public trust doctrine that under 237, that the government holds these minerals and natural resources in a public trust of the Ugandan people. And we're talking about young people. Why you see there's a lot of contestation on the streets, the street battles between that intergenerational struggle of young people vis-a-vis the old generation is because the young people feel that they have been shortchanged. They are not being involved in some of these conversations. Yet actually they are the custodians of these resources across Africa. As I've told you, you can only be in Nairobi to feel the tense situation there, and also you've seen it here in Uganda, the same situation. So we are likely to continue having that issue. Paul Wagabo, you raised the issue of mineral conflicts likely to happen, because if the young people go to know about this Africa Mining Vision and they feel that they are not getting involved, then they are going to push these tables and be able to push us. Then lastly, the other issue that you talked about, the role of civil society. I know, of course, the mindset of government is that the tendency of wanting to push us away as civil society players. I remember the other day when they were signing of the final investment decision, the president himself said that those people of civil society are causing a lot of confusion. As if like for us, we're not stakeholders. But we need to appreciate that the UN declaration recognizes human rights defenders. Our own constitution recognizes the work of civil society. And therefore, I think what we need to bring out, and I'm happy that Honorable Christian has raised the issue, the challenge of the environmental impact assessments. Our National Environment Act hasn't helped us, because under Section 5, it provides for the principles of environmental governance. But once you cascade those principles into the mining vision, you realize that actually on the ground, those have not been implemented. Issues of climate change that we see actually how the climate change is ravaging these vulnerable communities, especially in the mining communities. It's very serious. So I think as civil society, probably what we need to do, and I'm happy that SEATINI is leading the way, we may have to, for example, like at the National Coalition, we have a National Coalition of Human Rights Defenders, where you have over 60 organizations that are doing with environmental rights. We need to probably work out a plan on how we can actually engage these frontline environmental rights defenders, climate activists, especially young climate activists, and be able to bring them into the conversation, especially as we push for the efforts towards domesticating this conversation and ensure there's a human rights-based approach. Lastly, the issue of the judicial and non-judicial remedies. We know that the UN Guiding Principles on Business and Human Rights are alive to the fact that we need to ensure that we strengthen judicial and non-judicial remedies, especially at the East African level, but also at the African level. Personally, I'm in the East African Court of Justice trying to litigate about the issues of surrounding Bugoma Forest, the takeover of Bugoma Forest. I went to court in 2020 at the East African Court of Justice, but 4 years down the road, my matter has not been heard. And I was saying, okay, now we have this instrument, this institution, which we must test. But you realize that as we push for the same under the mining sector, you realize that the judicial remedies have not helped us. Therefore, I think what I want to recommend is that we need to explore the independent accountability mechanisms, which are actually largely non-judicial. And it speaks to the earlier point I talked about, the issue of the need for the human rights-based approach, that we need to see that the communities in these mining areas, actually, they are strengthened. Because you're talking about vulnerable communities. How do we ensure that actually they actually have a say? Because literally, when you look at across all these mining areas, these communities have actually remained even more vulnerable to how even before the mining had taken place. So the independent accountability mechanism is a very good avenue which we actually can be able to explore, because unlike the judicial remedies where you have to go to courts of law, these are actually more inclusive, and we have to push for the community development agreements where you have the communities actually being at the center of these mining activities that take place in their communities. I think by doing that, we shall be able to go a long way in trying to ensure that actually some of these principles are actually captured within the communities. And that means that now the issue of public participation, which is envisaged under the environmental impact assessment under Section 5, must be at the center, that you actually have the communities being at the center of these conversations. They are consulted so that the project affected persons actually can be able to drive this kind of, and be able to hold accountable these people involved in the mining sector. Thank you so much.
Thank you, Robert, for those insightful comments. I think one of the issues that colleagues who are interested in public interest litigation have suffered with has been defining the threshold of public consultation. Does it mean that when we are in this room and we meet a consultant and we have represented, and that is enough for public consultation? In Kenya, it was a major issue until they had to get a bill and an act on what defines the status or the threshold for public consultation. That's an issue that I think is very critical. Another issue that you leave with us to ponder about is, should opaqueness around these issues be deliberate so that people such as yourself and the Gen Zs are kept out of the discussion, so that they don't riot against the government? Because people who are very much informed can cause trouble. So would it be that politically or political economy dictates that we keep them out by not informing them? That's a question we need to discuss. But let me allow Honorable Atkinson to give his remarks.
Thank you very much, SEATI, everybody in the room. Thank you very much, consultant. I'm moved by the depth of the knowledge that you put across. Sometimes we imagine that Africa is short of science, technology, and innovation capabilities until we hear from our own. Sometimes it moves me seeing where Africa is, despite our endowment. I mean, people in this room are widely traveled. When you go to Stockholm in Sweden, or when you go to Sweden or Norway, or Denmark and the UK and a lot of these other, I mean, there's nothing much that they have. All they have is just a value system. Either in terms of time, management, and putting, the resources that they have to good use. I appreciate the consultant, and I want to believe the reason why we are where we are today as a country or as a continent is because the people that are in a position of leadership don't have what it takes to move countries or systems forward. We have, for a case in this country, a president that is a very good listener. And I'm just wondering why the president is kept away from people that really have the knowledge. And I want to encourage the people in this room, especially SEATI, the leadership, that the consultant and some other people should seek an audience with the president. And this particular presentation that are found in the room, you should make a presentation before the president. I've seen when he has time and he listens it, you know, he's in a position to direct. And the reason why I'm saying the president, I think our country right now is structured that nobody's going to give you attention unless the president has said a word. If we don't want our, this conversation to stay in this room, I think we might have to scale it up. And the president has got to, you know, listen in, pick, and he's a good listener. Is a good listener. So I'm encouraging SEATINI that in addition to bringing the consultant to share this knowledge, our consultant should also have the opportunity to share or make this presentation before or to share it with the president. I'm worried. My worry about Africa, and specifically Uganda, is there is a mismatch. You find somebody, and with due respect, is a journalist and is a minister for health, and then somebody who is a medical doctor is a minister for information, and it should have been the reverse. That when you're a medical doctor, be deployed in the Ministry of Health. And when you're a journalist, please go to information, because that's where we shall really, you know, tap into your intellectual capabilities. I'm one individual that believes in research, and I'm happy that we have scholars, especially the experts, including our consultant. I've seen the person moderating, the gentleman, with due respect, moderating this session, having, I think, something that looks like a journal paper or something. Yeah, there's my career. Now, the people that are in my career lectures and laboratories are people that will pay using taxpayers. Now, we have reduced our scholars to teachers. They go into lecture rooms, teach or talk, and then go back home. The role of universities is to generate knowledge. And this knowledge generated is not supposed to be kept on the shelves. They do a lot of studies, a lot of, you know, a lot of research. Now, the reason why their research is extremely important is the government is supposed to be a consumer of their research. Now, what happens in our situation is that the research produced by universities is not kept or is not even shared, or government has no interest, including Parliament. I kept raising this on the floor of Parliament, and I said, you can't deal with something that you have no idea. We're in a house where the minimum qualification is senior 6. That's the house. And unfortunately, we are charged with the duty, responsibility, and obligation of making laws. No wonder I want to raise it yesterday. No wonder when the president looks at the bill that we've just processed, or they're being sent back to the House for further modification. Why? Because every time we have a bill, including this particular bill on minerals, nobody really pays attention on who contributes to that bill. Do you have the expertise? Do you have the seniority? Do you have the experience? Do you have the competence? Do you have the intellectual ability? A lot of our research in universities are in shells, gathering dust, and nobody cares. Yes, you want to come up with a policy. You brought this bill. Is it research guided? Because we need evidence. And the reason why a lot of our our interventions are not making impact or the relevant impact is we have ignored the most critical element, and that's research. Because what we're doing is just guesswork. We should and then aim later. And it should have been the reverse, that you aim and then shoot. So as I see it ground, I want to encourage SEATINI, and I really appreciate for the great work that you're doing for our country. And I appreciate your partners that make this work possible. But I also want that you should go a step farther. We are valuable. Parliament is available. How can a parliament be relevant to the to the vision and mission of SEATINI? I come from consistent conclusion. I didn't know. Sometimes I said, but why was Kasese part of Uganda? Kasese is one district that can stand on its own. You have all of the minerals. Talk about a soil, copper, cobalt, lime, gold, endowment. Geologists have just revealed the other day, discovered that the best oil on the globe or in the whole world, we have the deposits right in Kasese. So I think if we have to move as a country, and I pray, consultant, when in your meeting with the president, I really appreciate the present vision right now, focusing on tourism and investing so much into tourism. Please, in your presentation, if we can marry or hand in hand with mining sector, I think nobody will be interested in how much the World Bank has to give us or IMF. We won't need those grants and loans. We have everything that it takes just right in here. So I think we have to catalog and cluster. And in this particular presentation, maybe I missed it because I found it in the middle. I want really, because we can do everything at the same time. Some of these things have to be clusters. So what is it, according to you, the expert, that we have to do in the immediate term? What is that you think we should do in the intermediate and then in the long run? And also looking at these interventions, we should do the mapping. What is primary, what is secondary, what is tertiary? And very finally, that even when we think about moving forward, I think we need to appreciate that we need a collective effort or a collective action and a collective thought, and focusing majorly on getting clear parameters. You, the scholars, and I've seen it from SEATINI, you are individuals that look at variables, various variables, dependent variable, interdependent variable, and independent variables. And then when you move from there, you look at basically from what you have already, content specification, boundary demarcations, and also ruling out pseudo scenarios. You really wonder, somebody in the room asks, you really wonder, why is Africa the way it is? Instead of moving forward, we're into a reverse gear. But have we lost it all? I think we still have the 25th hour time for us as the African people and the African continent to catch up with the rest of Africa. Very finally, I hope the lady from Investment Authority, is she still in the room? I think she's left. Somebody, let me say, from these relevant sectors, corruption. Now, if we are to make a significant or meaningful impact, we have to deal with that evil called corruption. It's bleeding this country to death. No serious investor is going to think about investing in here meaningfully or significantly for as long as you still have that room, that evil called corruption. what do they read in the newspapers? Corruption all over the sector, investment. Nobody comes from the UK or is going to fly in from the United States, and all they have to hear from the people that'll pick them up from the airport is for you to see the president, sir, part away with $200,000. That's not the world. They don't. That's alien to them. In any case, that'll be the last trip that they will ever make to an African country. So please make and create the necessary and the conducive environment for these investors. The reason why you look at all companies from the UK, none of them just right here. They were here. Where is Talo? They went back. Some of us a little bit closer to some of those systems. You really ask them, why did you leave the country? Sad story. So the middleman, fortune seekers. And I think as a country we have more work to do to make this thing called the mineral or the mineral sector work and work for everybody. The sooner we prioritize this, the better for our country. Thank you very much.
Thank you, Honorable. Kasese is still part of Uganda. We'll delve into that discussion. But there were issues that we were saying which are very pertinent during the discussion that I picked. We talked about, someone talked about the focal points. Who's the focal person? If I had to ask a question, why we are not domesticating the AMV or why we are, who should be the focal person? The other issue, someone said, we are still working in silos. So what do we take? And then there was another question, why is it that everything that is to do with the finance, all fund, all belongs to the Ministry of Finance and not in the parent ministry, so to say. But I will have a commentary from the Ministry of Finance to that effect.
Thank you, SEATINI, for organizing this important dialogue, and thanks for the extensive discussions from the technical team, but also from the honorable members of parliament who have given some deep insight onto the subject matter. I bring greetings from Mr. Ramadhan Gobi, Secretary to the Treasury, who unfortunately could not be here because of some prior engagements, but he sends you his deepest regards. I think due to the short nature of this dialogue, we will not definitely go into some of the micro issues that have come up here, but I think we can follow up with each other. I think the few remarks that I have put forward are ideally to do with the macroeconomy, because this discussion is very important for the macroeconomy. I think it's a rather dire economic scenario that one of the richest natural resource continents is also one of the most underdeveloped and most impoverished. And I think it has been the common theme in this dialogue that the issues or the challenges surrounding lack of long-term strategic planning and lack of political will as well as cooperation. I would like to thank SEATINI for bringing, reviving this discussion, because the AMV is critical to socio-economic development for Africa. You know, when we look at our comparative advantage, where is it compared to the rest of the world as regards minerals? We have in this continent the vast majority of the natural resources that are required, probably even in the advanced world. But that does not mean that we are at the level of industrialization within the advanced world. So how do we take advantage of having these resources and trying to develop as fast as the advanced countries? We can't match their industrial and technological advancement at the moment because, well, we are decades behind. So how do we benefit from this? It's simple. We need to cooperate on a continental level. And I'm happy that the consultant was talking about reviewing the AMV at a sub-regional level. As ESC, we need to review this vision and how it applies to the ESC. it's very important for us to see how we harness this comparative advantage, because if we don't cooperate and come together as a bloc and have a higher bargaining power, because that's the only way we can really harness and benefit from these minerals, we will not be able to match up with the advanced world. And I think some of the colleagues were talking about that issue of the political economy and why there's so much civil unrest in areas where you see vast natural resources like cobalt. It's because if those areas organize, then you have a bigger bargaining power, and you can attract more resources to the continent. So I believe this vision, even if it was signed in 2009, is very relevant even now. Especially the consultant talked about minerals development, and mineral development is one of the key areas. And I think the consultant mentioned that one of the reasons why the AMV has not taken track is because many of the other countries have focused on oil and gas. And that has been one of the critical aspects as to why it has not taken root. But as the Ministry of Finance, we are cognizant of the fact that these minerals, especially oil and gas, can have an impact, and in some cases adverse, on the economy. We have been proactive. We actually have a fiscal rule that has been put in place in anticipation for the first oil in 2025. And in terms of development path, they had good macroeconomic stability just before oil. But when they discovered oil and started mining this oil, and they almost have the same recoverable reserves that Uganda has, within a period of maybe 10 years, their debt doubled, their fiscal deficit doubled, and everything went to shambles. So it's very critical that we pay attention to these natural resources, because they can have dire implications for the non-mineral sectors such as agriculture and the others. So I think the key points that I want to bring forth here is that
debt. I know there's been a submission on that, and the colleague from finance gave an example of Ghana, which is a very classical case of the resource scarce economics in Africa. Now, for me, I think what we are failing to do is to balance these 3 or 4 things. Because where there are minerals, there's a lot of geopolitics. And the debate has been on submissions. Then the last point is on it's on climate change and the critical minerals. For example, rare earth. I think only Canada to exploit. But the challenge with the rare earth is the environmental destruction, degradation that they leave behind. Uganda has quite a huge potential for rare earth, but the issues, do we have the capacity to deal with the environmental effects? I've seen Dr. Gerard here, maybe you'll address that point, whether we can get the capacity to deal with the environmental effects of mining rare earth. In fact, if I'm not mistaken, it could be even having a higher value than the oil and gas sector that we have at the moment. Minerals, trade, public debt, and geopolitics, and then domestic investments in these sectors. Thank you.
Thank you so very much. All those things you're talking about are first cousins. When you treat one bad, somehow the other one is affected. Let's hear from the Minister of Finance. I'll start with my friend here, and then he will. The microphone will stay on the same table.
Thank you very much. And I'll just give a few highlights I've put down, and I know my colleague from the planning doctor will represent the ministry later. As we talk mines or minerals, it's very important that also look at the challenges that come with them. One being the asset stranding. Honorable Salah mentioned that some minerals are not in big quantities that we need to do value add locally. And we do not want to invest or have investment set out for mineral that will be will run out in 3 years or 10 years, yet we've invested significant and we have the One of the examples is what happened in Kilembe. The system was abandoned, and now that's an asset stranded. Issues of environment and social justice have been highlighted. And I think this is very important for us to further escalate that, as a colleague mentioned, these environment and social impact assessments are done, but once your business starts to run, there's little follow-up or assurance that there's adherence to the requirements of environment and social governance. I want to talk about issue of capacity. And I think this stands out, especially when you talk about aspects of assessing the resource, value adding to the resource, handling the different social and environmental aspects. We need to grow our local capacity. This is still wanting, and a colleague honorable from Kasese noted that universities, for instance, in this discussion, we don't have universities represented. Probably there is some information already they've generated that could preferably could have informed some of these discussions. So we need to grow our local capacities to handle some of these issues of mines and minerals. And I think also Honorable noted that this space is still limited in person. Equally, infrastructure. Infrastructure is quite expensive, but how much or what do we expect from the foreign direct investment? I think as of now, FDI contributes about 37% to our GDP. And the main entry in the sector is mines. So do we still want to keep it going further? One of the challenges that Sub-Saharan Africa currently has is that most of the developments in the energy, renewable energies, particularly the distributed systems, are mostly by foreigners. There are studies that have been done, and the fear is, won't we come to a point where we've given out our entire power system to foreigners? So I don't think that's the scenario we'd want for our minerals. I've also noted that we need also to benchmark. Cases have been alluded to, Ghana and others. Is there any other country that has domesticated this vision? What are their experiences? I'll give a scenario. Years back, Uganda adopted what we call the feed-in tariff scheme, borrowed or copied from German, and it flopped here. It did not attract any investment for the years it was implemented until we got the Get Fit program that really added a premium on it to enable it to be viable. I've also noted that minerals, like energy, can be a reason for conflict. Minerals can be a source for conflict, and minerals can be a means, a reason for conflict. Means, source, and reason for conflict. And this can be domestic or regional. So we need also to look into those aspects. How do we shock absorb ourselves from such emergencies of conflicts due to the minerals? Issues of regional and continental bodies, African Union, East African Community, these bodies are they're very important, but they are limited financially. They do not have a financial arm. So beyond developing beautiful policies and visions, implementation of these policies are not financed because it remains at the leisure or voluntarily to the respective governments. And that's why you find that this vision has been existent for close to 15 years, but we're just discussing domesticating it. And we need to look into what the vision speaks to vis-a-vis the country priorities. Because if the priorities of the country do not align with the vision targets or and activities, will still go unattended to. Then we need to look at, as we design or domesticate, the trickle-down effect. Most of the people that actually work in these mine spaces are the bottom people. People who are exposed to health hazards, who suffer the environmental issues and social aspects. So we need to see that these are fully represented and captured in whatever we do. And of course, that takes into consideration aspects of gender. I have last 2 points to put across. And I think this one, my colleague engineer will doctor will talk to it. the programmatic approach that government adopted. Minerals is also has cross-cutting aspects into Ministry of MEMD, into trade, into other. There's a need to consolidate this, and I think Doctor here will talk more on that aspect, given that he leads on the planning aspects. Lastly, we need to look at minerals and mining as a tourism venture. I think we've looked at mostly the wildlife and the rest, but minerals, be it even energy, there is an entire form of tourism referred to as energy tourism. There is what is called mining heritage and mining tourism. These are things we can also generate revenue from and really help domestic investment in the mining space. Thank you.
Thank you. Thank you very much. I think the cornerstone of all this discussion has been the word domestic. Domestication, domestic investment, domestic financing, domestic capacities, domestic content. But we have the technical person in the room from the Ministry of Energy to tell us about that. Some people have been asking me, oil and gas sector has a particular emphasis on local content. Why haven't we discussed about it the whole of today? But I'm happy to see that we have Dr. Gerard. Dr. Gerard, you will take us through your ministry's position, also the approach on vis-a-vis the domestication of AMV, but also when I've been tasked by the organizers that you will be the one to give the closing remarks. So if you have anything to say, you would wish to say it now, because when it closes, then you will maybe continue the discussion after this meeting. Because that one will also trigger his discussion. But I trust him, we can maneuver anywhere to start from at least.
Just one sentence, 1 minute. Doctor, thank you very much. I come from Kasese, but I'm certainly Ugandan. One thing unique to Kasese is literally all of the minerals that we have scattered all over the place are concentrated in one district. And certainly that's not news to you. You might have received from reports or feedback from geologists across the country saying the best oil on the global scene, we have those deposits in Kasese. Now we have cobalt, we have copper, we have lime, we have literally everything. I'm told gold in some place, but there's nothing going on. You're somebody coming from the minerals. What it is, surely with the crying and everybody's screaming, the lack of money, our economy is not doing okay. Surely with all of these rich mineral deposits that we have, not only in Kasese but across the country, why can't we really tap into this? And before I submitted, I made a request, and I think you can scale it up, share it with your minister. We have SEATINI in the room, with those scholars or the consultant in here. I don't know whether you can arrange, you can ask Minister Nankabirwa Ruth to work out an appointment to have a presentation, especially that was made before you came, so that the president benefits from this kind of thing to, enrich his intervention capabilities. Thank you, sir.
Over to you, Doctor.
Thank you very much. Good morning, ladies and gentlemen. The challenge of coming late, you don't seem to pick. Good afternoon. Yeah, and all protocol observed. At least I can see my minister. No, I don't say my minister. Honorable Sarah Pendi was our minister For us, once you are a minister, you are a minister. So we don't care where you are. We meet you and you are our minister. For us, we are small boys. So, greetings from, I think you invited the permanent secretary. So you did not invite me, you only invited the permanent secretary, I think. So she only looked through the letter, and just a few, 1 hour ago, is when she called me and said, there is this thing with yours. Because I'm the task team leader on energy transition. And I'm happy to see many people in the room who have been working on this subject. So thank you very much. And the members of parliament, apart from Minister Saru Pende, also the members of parliament have been very critical in this journey. I think, let me first put this into context. The transition. You remember when one day there was a very big demonstration against the exploitation of mineral resources. Do you remember that? In Kampala, and we could not go forward with the oil, leave alone the other minerals, the oil. So there was a very big issue. And when we met, my name is Gerard Banaga Bayenji, and I head technical planning at the ministry. I've not been there for a long time, but maybe for about 25 years. 14 years in oil, 10 years, 8 years in energy and minerals. So when there was that crisis, we first had a crisis of oil until we developed the commercial plan for oil, which we are following now. But when the crisis came, what was the problem? The problem was that Uganda did not have a clear plan on how to exploit her natural resources. And therefore, all the other things were wishful thinking. I don't know, Honorable, if you are in Sharm el-Sheikh, but I can see some people who are in Sharm el-Sheikh. So I asked my minister, I said, can I meet those people who are against us? So that you first listen to what they are saying. So in Sharm el-Sheikh, I had my minister, we sat and listened to what these guys were saying. And as they were talking, when big people are talking for you, you are taking your notes. And the minister asked for a year to respond. And in a year, we returned with the transition plan. So at least the first thing is that Uganda has got an energy transition plan, which we launched in Dubai. I remember working with my friend across the sun, struggling to launch at the COP28. So Uganda has got a transition plan which lays out the path that the country is taking on how to exploit her natural resources, driving the country to what we call a low carbon development path, including the role of oil and gas, as well as the critical minerals. And this document is readily available now. I remember preparing a presentation for the minister to go and present to our colleagues at Parliament, because when you are out, you are all one team. Great. So that's where it is. I think I had some slides. Whom did I give them to? I'm not a good politician, and I don't intend to be one. So my points are very specific. Yeah. Okay. So we run, and as you realize, I deal with energy, I deal with minerals, I deal with oil. So I always have to say, what's the question now around? So this is around the minerals. So let me take you on the minerals. Just continue. Go ahead. Really, the purpose, and I saw the concept here, the purpose of the transition is to place the minerals and the oil and gas within this transition. First, I didn't put for you the transition. What is a transition? This transition is not standardized. If you read many countries, they say transitioning from high carbon to low carbon, isn't it? If you went to the east, to Honorable Saro Pendi's home, and she tells her people, you transit. Some might ask her, Honorable, from what to what? Some are in darkness. So if you say transit, they have no idea what you are talking about. So to some of our people, transition is from darkness to light. Isn't it? It's not like in the UK, in France, in some parts of Europe where 80% of the, or 60% of the energy resources is highly carbon intensive. No. Here, ours almost 90 plus renewable. The problem we have is on the other side of the biomass, isn't it? Using biomass. So the energy intensity is there. Most of this you would have heard of it. I will keep on it. But you know you have a lots and lots of resources that we need to bring to use. We need to bring to use. Hydro, we're almost over 2,000 megawatts now. We want to pick the capacity from geothermal. As I speak now, I have a technical team which is doing a feasibility study right now in Naivasha to come and finish Panyamur and Kibiro. Peat, reduction of biomass, solar, and so many others. Wind, and all that potential, bring it to light. So what we have under the transition plan, some key aspects. One, accelerate the access to energy, universal, by 2030. Two, expand the mix so it is low carbon intensive. And then three, and also mitigate the near-term growth. And mainly, the key thing, as you're talking of the MVA, as we're talking of exploitation of which resource, can the country harness, utilize her resources while maintaining her obligations under the international agreement? And those agreements, I see. Are you still with CCD? Yes. We have the climate change policy. As a country, we have also stated what our obligations are. And we have two lines: conditional, assuming we get support, and also non-conditional. Under this ETP, which we modeled for a whole year, we have modeled the two angles: how Uganda can meet her requirements under the conditional, as well as the non-conditional. And that was really the major task. So that when somebody asks, you are able to pick that document and you say, this is our path, which meets our obligations. I can see Honorable, maybe you need to move. I think you can allow Honorable to leave. Did she give her final remarks? Yeah. Okay. Thank you. So, the plan of the middle income by the 2040s, upper quartile of middle income countries by 40s. And therefore, you have an obligation to meet the demands of that country in a manner that does not impede or inhibit your performance on other sectors. That's the modeling. Okay. If you go forward, if you look at Uganda by 2050, that is how the function will look like. At least I expect to be around 920 pentajoules from the 520 pentajoules by 2020. You see, under this, the key thing will be to displace the traditional biomass into modern energy. And formerly it has been tough for us to set targets for this, or there were no targets. But now with this, I have targets for 5 years, for 3 years, up to 2030. So I have what to expect from renewable, what to expect from solar, what to expect from nuclear, what to expect from hydro. You know, without target, anybody performs and thinks he has done very great. All right? Now with specific targets, I'm able to hold each section by those targets. So when you go, you find that the key sectors of this are the transport, industry, service sector, and residential. I think for today, your focus is on the industry, the mining sector. And we validated this, moved all across the industries in Uganda to know their consumption, their use, those which are in the minerals, the processing, the energy intensity, and the value addition. Of course, as you grow the country, you know, when demand, what happens when demand for something goes up and the supply is of some particular level, what happens? The price goes up, isn't it? When the price goes up, therefore there are issues of affordability. Is it not? Now, what then enables us to keep this affordable is what you call efficiency. Efficiency is the solution to keep the energy affordable and secure. Can you go? This is for the energy people. I want to reach the yeah, go back, just go back. Yeah, here. And I know many people ask, oh, Uganda is very blessed. We can always do a lot of solar. Now, let me tell you, technically speaking, it is not as easy to say, let there be 50 gigawatts of solar. No. It can't fit in the system. Every time you say, I'm always, you know me, I sit in the middle. I'm always fighting with the guys over near, but they say, I can bring 20 megawatts of solar. Then, when you say you give me 20 megawatts of solar, I have to find some 20 megawatts to backstop this one. You get it? Then I'm dealing with the oil guys. They're like, oh, we can push 100 megawatts from where? From the oil. I say like, okay, fine. Then I say, but that will be coming from the oil processing facilities. Once you switch them on, they can't switch off. It's a take or pay. You must take. Can the system absorb? So I can tell you I'm always the worst guy in the room. Everybody hits you from left to right and you say, come on down, let's go slow. But solar is critical. Why? Solar lighting, mat lights, solar home systems, mini grids, these are going to be in the near term up to 2035. These are going to play a critical role in the access. But let's go to the next slide. When you go to the next slide, this is where the critical minerals come in. This is where the critical minerals come in. And some of the critical minerals, I think you've talked all this. You know, Uganda is blessed, just like I think DRC. Very few countries have this level of potential. The key thing is the supply chains of these critical minerals. The supply chain of these critical minerals. The key thing is value addition. How do you extract or how do you add value onto these minerals? Yes, the country has huge levels of resource, but they require significant levels of investment and value addition. If we can get this right, the minerals have the capacity to transform this country significantly for quite a long time. And that's why you have seen now there is a deliberate effort on value addition. I think there was even there is a presidential ban, you know that, on the exportation of raw materials. Huh? Now, when you hear a ban, what does it mean? A ban is a market intervention, isn't it? It's a market intervention. When there is a market intervention in the form of a pronouncement, it means there is a market failure. To force a market to behave in some way. So this one is forcing value addition. And as a person in the thick of things, I can already tell you I'm involved, I think, in the discussion of about 3/4 value addition ventures. And we should be able to see some results very soon. But you have already seen some factories opening up. Haven't you seen some of them? All these are coming from just disorganizing the market, making sure you force the market to do value addition. Because if you don't, then we are losing a significant part of the value out of these minerals. So this is where all the laws you've seen, the Mining Act, the licensing regimes, the pronouncements, the what, they are all aimed at creating a value to these critical minerals. And these critical minerals, they are the ones which are pushing the transition. This thing of energy transition, clean transition, it is the critical minerals pali. The transport of the future is electricity. But where do those things come from? Critical minerals. The ones we have been talking about, most of the assets in the electricity value chain, you know, the wires, the transformers, most of those components are picking raw materials from the minerals. So what we have is an opportunity that we can participate in the processing, exploration, and value addition in production, and then create these products which are used in transition. The other day, I was at an international conference whereby we are looking at the supply chains of these critical minerals. And I was saying, instead of looking at the supply chain alone, let's look at even utilization of those minerals at source. So that we have only finished products which are doing what? Which are moving. That creates wealth, that creates jobs at the point of source. Rather than you keep exporting, you know, raw iron ore, raw cobalt, raw what. So can we take advantage of these opportunities? And as I said, most of these things are required in the transition: wind turbines, solar panels, electric vehicles, battery storage. You see, I think, let me tell you something. When you go to two things, one, for instance, solar panels. If you go to a factory now, some of the factories which we have influenced to begin the journey to transition and have already adopted, we started about 2 years ago, installation of solar panels about 30% have cut, they have cut about 30% of their energy use. These industries, I'm talking of energy intensive industries. I will not tell you the names because I use them for validation. Why? Because they have installed the solar systems to supplement the grid service. Now, beyond that, this aspect of battery storage, you see now battery storage is like a new technology, is like an energy resource. Yes. What is what? Somebody has put solar panel systems, all right, and their energy consumption has gone 30%. You see, he cannot put 60 or 100, technically speaking, because of the need to change the technology the factories and industries are using, all right, but also to back up the system. So this is not research, this is empirical evidence. You're talking to a technical person, eh? Yes. You want me to tell you the name of the industry? You can go there. Eh? Yeah. Because once we do modeling, you see, I spend a whole year modeling. The first time you model, when you get results, you must first check how credible they are. How you check them, you go and test them in the nation, and then you say, okay, are the results correct? So we validate. I can tell you cement factories, tea factories. And I go there with my team. Sometimes I'm quite busy, but when I get time, I drive around the country to these specific ones. Oh, when is this technology changing? You check on the market. When are these people able to change this technology? How long will it change? Will it take to transform? And when does it become economically feasible for industries to transform? You just can't go and tell industries, you stop using, some of them are using sawdust, firewood. For instance, do you know these guys who make tea industries? Every time they have like 20 hectares of tea, they must have 20 hectares of forest. Do you know that? For drying. In fact, when you talk of energy transition, don't look at the homes, because our homes are very small. How much do they use? This small firewood which we collected when we are young. But one industry in Fort Portal can use the entire biomass of the entire region. So, me, when I'm focusing on transition, I go for high impactful areas. You get it? Yes, that's what I'm saying, the cumulative effect. That's what I can add up the entire, where is your region? Kabare. So I can add up I originate from Muko. I can add up the whole of Kabare, but you can find the factory of my friend the other side. He uses the entire biomass of like the whole of Kabare. One guy of the factory. One guy. So it's a question of numbers. But then I was telling you the next thing from solar, then batteries. Now, batteries is a new introduction. That's why the revolution of batteries is taking so fast. Why? Because you are able to store energy. You are able to store energy. You have heard of us talking about smart grids. Did you talk about smart grids? The grids, so that people can have some systems, they generate, they supply themselves, then they can supply the balance to the grid. That's one aspect. But also, have you seen electric vehicles? Have you seen electric vehicles? You must have. At least a motorcycle, you have seen them. Now, you can have a system whereby when there is too much power, you charge the batteries of vehicles, of buses, of whatever you have. When there is less power at some peak times, the batteries can serve you back. You get that? Those are smart grids. So as we upgrade the minerals on this side, we also have to upgrade the what? The grids. So that the whole system becomes seamless. Of course, as a normal customer, a consumer, you don't see that. But people who are running the systems, they're able to balance that. And that's what we are now doing under the power planning systems. That reduces the cost. Otherwise, you find that a 2,000 megawatt, you have to supply it to one group, and then you have to pay for all of it, because if nobody's using it, you pay for the power. So these come in as mitigative measures to finally reduce down the cost of service. So this is where you are, and the use of these critical minerals within the transition or the networks. And where is this gentleman from Kasese? You know, he touched something which was, how many of you have been to Kilembe? We went there when we were kids to study, didn't you? Assuming you went to a good school that could afford a trip to, you still go there. And when you go there, the copper is huge. Yes, they have huge reserves. And I was telling somebody, I said, you know, there is no way that some of us went to that place when we were kids. We saw it, we studied, we finished, we joined the workforce, okay? And then we cannot leave it the way we can't leave that place the way we found it. We are almost all of the same age bracket. The guys who were here before us decided to close it. Eh? So don't blame me, and I can't blame you either. But for us, can we do something different? You get it? We have to change that place. It will have to work. And you give it a short while, you will see Kirembe coming back. In whichever way. It's going to do what? It's going to come back. While you are walking in, sir, Honorable, I'm discussing your area of Kasese. We recognize the resources that are in that area. The biggest challenge is to do value addition. The biggest challenge is to revamp those areas which, why they went, whatever, the students of history can do that. But for us, we found them the way we have done what? We have found them. I will tell you that I have moved personally on foot. Of course, if you move around with a government vehicle, then people will think there is a problem. So you go, you park somewhere, you get some friends, you drive around the communities, those who have settled in the former areas where the reserves are, you see the catchment area. To measure the magnitude of work it will take to revamp the area. That task is not simple. And I didn't want a consultant to bring a report. You know, information assembly, I never want a consultant to have more information than myself. So I first get my ground hand information. Revamping Kirembe is a monumental task. But when you study it, you also get to know why it went the way it went. I think that literature is available. You can read it. But the question is to get it back, to revamp. And not only that area, but the entire area. But also to do more exploration and get more resources. So, Honorable, this is going to come, hopefully in your lifetime. Or in ours at least. I was just telling the colleagues, all of us have been to that place as kids, as students, and we wonder why people who came before us didn't do enough. But we don't want somebody to say the same about us when we have left. So the works are almost in the final stages. You will see Kirembe being revamped. And you just have to do something like this and the whole area will change. Your whole politics will change. At least you will have something. Most of the people I can tell you in the ministry, we have 3 senior people who grew up in that area. So whose livelihood, whose success depended on that area. So there is a lot of emotional attachment to see the place going up. That's why it has been very easy for me to drive forward, because I say, that's the one which made you. You cannot just leave it like that. So we're going to get all those minerals out. But the negotiations are tough. It's not as easy as like, let's get things up. No. Because these are huge capital investment with a long gestation period, with patented technologies. So, but you can take my word that we are going to get it up. There's a committee, I think maybe a colleague from finance, if you had wanted, he would have talked about that. But there is a government team working on it to make sure we get this. And now the ban is that we must get value addition. So there is no shortcut about it. I think that ban to me was a blessing. It forces everybody to move. So all these minerals, this is literature. If you want to know how much is in Kasese, in Kirembe, in Okopa, and where, this is there. And you can always, I will remove some of the patented information. Don't share this one. Some of the things are not good for your eyes. So I remove some things and then I leave you with the general knowledge which you should have. If you are somewhere and you are saying we have minerals, you have some numbers to talk about. Eh? This thing of speaking like, we have minerals, how much? I don't know. If you don't know what you have, you cannot attract investment. You must know how much you have and how much it takes to get out, and therefore what you need. Okay, all that, graphite, rare earths, Makutu, all those things. I have put this thing for information because SEATINI and many everybody and honorables, you meet so many people. And when you meet them, Mayor is arguing at office, give as much information as you can. These people have the information. If you go and find an investor, he will certainly have to come and meet us, isn't it? And he will develop the area and everybody will contribute. Then Mayor will be hard on him on the structuring of the investment, the value we get, how much do we benefit as a country, what should be done, what should not be done. But you can only discuss with somebody who is there. If he's not there, you have nobody to do it. So attracting investment is a very challenging task. Okay. I think I will not want to spend much. The capacity, let me try to answer the issues which were raised while I was here. Capacity, do you have the capacity? I think now we are relatively developing the capacity. Now we have fair capacity. We now have what? Capacity. You know, for instance, when we started with the oil, there was no much capacity. So they got some people, sent them for studies, they came back. I'm one of those. So we could engage with the companies to develop the commercial framework. That's how we made it. Otherwise, it was tough. Do we have capacity to ensure that we develop the resources in a manner that does not inhibit our sustainability in terms of environment? Yes. If you check on the transitional plan, you can see this one we did it with the International Energy Agency, and my requirement was simple. Before we start doing work, I must have, you see, for me, before I do any piece of work, I must make sure I have enough human resource. So I said we must have 10 Ugandans at a level that they can deal with you. So we got 10 people, sent them elsewhere, Seychelles, Italy, they came, they are now modelers, so now they can negotiate, and we did with the IEA. Next, we are doing because I know the challenge here, people say the country has got good plans and policies, but the problem is what? I have heard that. I said now we are going to implementation. So how you implement, you have to develop what you call an integrated energy resource master plan. Even that, I have said the condition, I must have some 10 good guys who can do the work. I have worked with many people here, so they know the way I work. I don't want to be in the room and you are alone. You discuss, nobody can say yes or no. Challenge you. If you can't have anybody challenge you, then you are useless. You need to have to sit back and let people work. And when you go to meet these honorables, they fire you, they see you answering them, you give them sufficient responses, you give them enough answers, you give them enough information, they go and do for you the job. You must have the capacity to do these things. Because this industry is not for, if you close your eyes, they run over you. They run over you. Before a guy comes to negotiate for Kirembe, he first tells me, what's the government team? There's a guy from finance, there's one from lands, there's one from energy, there's what are their qualifications, what's the experience. They first map all of you before you enter the negotiations. If you are not good enough. Yes. Cross-cutting, I'm sure you know, the Koigo Finance must have told you we have the programmatic approach. You no longer sit as one ministry and do things. So we have these programs where everybody is contributing toward the same whatever. Local content, I think we have emphasized this. You saw it do in gas, in oil. We are doing it as well in the minerals. We are just borrowing what has worked the other side to put it in minerals. That's why you've seen the kind of laws that we have designed. It's just a smart way of doing things that you have, you know, like in the oil, if you come as an expert, we give you a contract for 3 years. We can renew for a maximum of another 2 years, 2 or 3 years. And after that, you should have trained the Ugandan to replace you. If not, domestication of AMV, I think you have discussed that very well. So, in brief, this is the, when you get a person like me, I can discuss depending on which angle we go, but I don't want to spend too much time. You should have closed by midday, so thank you very much. I can take just a few questions, but I hope I was very clear. Yeah, can you have a meeting with the minister? Yes, you tell me the subject, the content, because I don't want, when you go there, then you'll go and tell her, then you'll come and meet her. That means you want, tell me the subject, I appreciate it, the content, the issue. Then I draft the response because you're asking me what's the response, you know. Then I call you, you walk in, I will take you, you sit, you discuss what you want, and we finish. So that's not a problem, especially if it is bring a perspective from the area, as you have enumerated. It would be easy for us to have that meeting and listen back. And what? Me, I always go there to at least to hear the other view, isn't it? It enlightens you. That's why you find resource knowledge. So whenever I hear SEATINI, I go. This society which is complicated, I say, let me go. Send me wherever it is complicated. Yeah. One or two.
Since you're close to me, it's, one comment is that the ban, that the presidential ban triggered smuggling. Yes or no? The other one is, have you considered attracting domestic investment in the mining sector? Or do you think there could be a plan to actually attract local investors to actually go into the mining sector than the whole mindset of FDI? Because I come from a school of thought who believe that foreign direct investment is not the silver bullet for Uganda's economy.
Could also ask, in regards to a local content strategy for the minerals sector, it's one that we've also been trying to push for. So I'm glad that you raised it. We could also share possibly some of the areas and proposals that we would like to see incorporated with you or with the ministry to properly align clearly on some of those issues that would like to come out strongly. And then maybe also a question on stranded assets. Is that something that the ministry is also looking at in regards to the minerals sector, also in regards to oil and gas sector, how we are seeing these potentially being also heavy investments that having to rely on capital, but what it does when we do have an impact on the stranded assets that we could get.
And mine is just an issue of capacity, because people talk about capacity building. One time someone said capacity building has no definition. But I've worked in an institution where people who received such capacity after heavy investment by government are attracted by multinationals or other companies, and they are taken away because of fair pay and other interesting institutions. As a ministry, with your investment, I like your approach, 10 people handling this, 10 people handling this. What has been your retention strategy in terms of maintaining that resource beyond knowledge transfer from someone who has stayed and gone? Because that retention issue has always been a very common one when it comes to retaining qualified personnel and experts.
Could you please give us the slide as it is without editing?
Information is patented.
Thanks, Doctor. You gave us some good stats there on the volumes or quantities available, but I didn't see the economic side of it. What is the value? We know the one for oil. What is that for rare earth and the others? Have you reached that level of assessment?
Very finally, I must warn us that we do not have lunch on the house. So as you ask questions, prepare that the lunch will be not borne by the organizers. So.
Thank you so much, Doctor. My concern is you've talked about our current hydropower capacity, and you said we are almost making 2,000 megawatts. But also I'm aware that the focus of the ministry is that by 2040, we should be able to have 42,000 megawatts of electricity. So could you kindly disaggregate under what portfolio? For example, said it's not possible to have, for example, 50 gigatons of solar. So in your energy transition plan, can you tell us what is the amount of hydro, what is the amount of solar, what is the amount of, and how are we going to achieve that vision? Because it looks ambitious in light of what we actually see and what we project on the future as far as the future is concerned. But also, how have you been able to align that vision in light of the fact, because you're talking about low carbon, yet the global goal is that we should have zero carbon by 2050. We should focus on having zero carbon, net zero by 2050. And we have committed ourselves as a country under our NDC framework through the Ministry of Water and Environment that we are actually going to reduce our greenhouse gas emissions a given percentage of 24.7%. So how have you been able to aggregate that and be able to harmonize your position as the Minister of Energy vis-a-vis the Ministry of Water and Environment? Thank you.
I remember our ministry has a definition of net carbon, and it was okay. But Doctor, you can take it from there.
Yeah. Thank you very much. You see, what I told you, I like meeting groups like this. You have very nice questions that at least they help you to check your notes. You know, when you teach students, you wait to see the question. The kind of questions which comes through will tell you the level of understanding, which is, and sometimes you are very excited when you hear a very good question. Thank you very much. Smuggling. I told you that my first job as a junior officer was trading. I'm a trader. So I trade anything. I trade oil, I trade gas, I trade electricity, I trade what? I trade anything. I can even trade human beings, but I haven't gotten good value of them. Whenever there is an opportunity, whenever there is an arbitrage, a price arbitrage, there's always smuggling. And from Kaware, you don't need to be educated about smuggling because we are the chief smugglers. Does not mean. Now, whether the ban is the one which created that, no, that was there even long before. There is even a smuggling between Ebinombe. Sometimes it is nice when you grow up in the village. You come with a lot of knowledge. So when you get theory and advance, then you confirm the things that you used to see. So smuggling is there. It was not caused by the ban. It could contribute. I'm sure if you ran a tornado chart for smuggling, you could find ban there as one of the factors. But local investment is what you are. For sustainability, you cannot over-rely on FDI. You need to have a mix. And for the resources to create a lasting value, there has got to be a local participation. So local investment but it has got to be structured properly. There are some countries where you have some particular percentage. I think even here you have it in some of the laws, that this percentage must be for the locals. I see some people celebrating about it. The implementation of that is not as easy as it sounds, because you have so many foreigners looking like locals. But the model which we are picking, and I can tell you, we are even hiring an officer. We are hiring some specialists who should come in the next 2 weeks or something like that. Penina. So I want those people, because I have terms of reference laid out. I have some reportments. I want us to analyze them. And when we are giving you that strategy, I want it to be robust. Can you wait for me to analyze that one? The things which I cannot defend technically, I don't want to talk about them. Let's first analyze, because this is what you expect from us. Yeah. Stranded assets. You see, there are also things called stranded assets, but there's also stranded skills. Have you heard of things called the white elephant? You know, in the economics of natural resource exploitation requires that you're able to manage assets. If you use, I studied most of my part. When Norway developed from the oil industry, but where did the skills from the oil industry come from? They had come from the shipping industry. So they were able to be transferred to the oil industry. Stranded assets, they create a very big economic imbalance. And I think you have a number of them. But as I said, we are trying to do something to see how to recapture and create these values from these stranded assets, but also the stranded skills. So tomorrow when you get over from the oil, where will your skills go? Where will your skills go? So the whole effort is to avoid these redundant, make sure that, and that one comes from the project structure. When do you start? When do you pick your money? When do you decommission? And how do you ensure that the O&M framework is so fluid that it cannot allow a stranded asset? These are issues of structure. Let's see what we get out of that. But much of it is on the O&M. And we are testing some models to see which ones can work best. Especially that we have good examples of stranded assets. Like Honorable was saying, which is a very painful thing. Anybody who goes to this area and you see those things and you don't feel pain, then maybe live blood has disappeared. But also think through skills, because now we are telling kids, study this. What will happen in the next 20 years? They will just be like that. If their skills cannot be transferred, then you have a challenge. You will have actually misled them. So that is trying to be managed. Capacity, I think, as I said, I have given you my personal experience, but I think it has worked. I did this when I was called from Dar es Salaam to come and lead the commercialization of oil. It's the first task I did to develop the skills of a minimum core team of Ugandans to do that. And these people, of course, you come, select from the best universities. I think Doctor will take you. I wrote to all the embassies of Uganda around the world to find the Ugandans who have got some good qualifications. Wherever they are, we got some. Then others whom we couldn't get, we sent some to schools. They studied, they came back, and we did them. And yeah, I can tell you, those who are talking about retention, it is very hard to retain a very good skill. It is very hard. But also, why? Why? In my class, I'm the only person who is working in Africa. And my reason, when I ask my friends, when they ask me from New York, Singapore, I tell them, it is nice to work in Africa. Why? In Africa, you never run out of problems. You have enough problems here. So every day your head is thinking. But if they take it to New York and they say, you create improvement on on Times Square, you will struggle. What value are you adding? Yeah, so, but me, I've been here and I think I've enjoyed it. But these people I trained for the oil did not stay. But where did they go? They are Ugandans. I can tell you they are supporting the industry. They are supporting the industry. Can we use the guy from finance has gone? You remember Tumsime Mtevire? He's a fellow who had no problem to train Ugandans. If they leave the ministry, fine, but they are Ugandans. It's okay. wherever they go, they're adding a what? A value. If a person has left Ministry of Lands and is a good specialist and he is now working with SEATINI, doesn't he add value? So why should that give me sleepless night? You get the skills you need at the particular time you want them. Let them do a good job you want to be done. Where they go, I think they are still Ghanaians, they will be able. Retaining them, of course, some places I've seen them paying highly, but you know, sometimes I think those who do HR, you know, excitement and value addition and exciting stuff is not an issue of payment. There are many factors. But the challenge I have seen, let me tell you, is having the right people at a particular time to do a good job. That is where, as a team leader, you have to struggle to find the right people. So that when you produce an output, my brother, when we were in Dubai, when we launched this transition plan, many people looked through. No one had, they could not query it. No one could query it. They saw us, they were like, yeah, this is a good masterpiece. Very few countries have done it south of Sahara. When we did the commercial plan for whatever, for oil, it came out very well. So every time you do something, do it great, to the best of your knowledge. Slides editing, no, I'll give you the edited version. That's what you need. The economic value. Now, let me tell you the challenge. You see, oil is complicated, but minerals are more complicated. Because you see, with the oil is just one commodity. I know Brett yesterday was at $7 a barrel. I can get in, I can check at Rastanura, I can check at Trafigura, I can check West Texas Intermediate. I know what is on the North Sea. I can tell the value of Uganda's oil. Just, if you give me 5-10 minutes, I will tell you now Uganda's value is at this level. Now, minerals, each commodity has its own economics. The gold one, the iron ore from our place, if you go to tin, so you have to analyze each one separately. So I would not put all the economics of this, but for each value addition we have done, we run the economics of that particular commodity. And I can tell you some of them are complicated. Now, if you give me some, I'm doing the one of iron ore, for instance, and the cobalt, because we are pushing the revamping of Kirembe. And iron ore, we are fast-tracking the value addition because engaged in that activity. So if you give me like within the end of 1 month, I will have the economics of those two. The rest we have, but not you will run a project by project and check the feasibility there. But the other ones, we are running them at a global level. So those, I wouldn't have things like here because they would not be. Target 52 gigawatts. If I went through the slides next year, you will see where that power will be coming from. We have modeled in a least cost manner. The objective is to reduce emissions. When I say low carbon, that you are providing energy, but in a low carbon form, not high carbon intensity. Are the slides still there? This thing of net zero. Our modeling, our plan has got a net zero of 2065. 2065. Net zero does not mean zero emissions or zero carbon. And thank you for that question. It does not. In fact, ours, what I have found that our emissions, and this was a question for those who are fighting the oil industry, our emissions, because the country is developing, our demand for transport energy will continue growing. So the emissions, they grow, they reach 2040, they peak, and they go into a decline. And what is peaking them and declining them is energy efficiency, number one. Number two, introduction and acceleration of electric mobility. Number 3, replace. You see, you're talking of emissions, but there's a lot of emissions from biomass use. And you know, can you imagine reducing our population from 90 to 50% of biomass use? Do you know how big that challenge is? These guys are working on clean cooking. That's a big job. Even achieving 15% is huge. It's huge. So, but our emissions go like this. So if you go, hey, you go to the last, this is the only graph you should cram and take a picture. Go to the end. It should be the last picture. This one tells you the oil. This one, come back. This is the $1.2 million graph. It is so nice when you ask a question and I already have the answer. You see, they grow, they reach 2040, and then they decline. And this is as per our NDCs and commitment as per the Paris Agreement. This is what we had to prove. So somebody cannot stop you from exploiting your resources because you have demonstrated that you can meet your obligations while you are pursuing your ambitions. And I show you the conditional and non-conditional at the baseline. So the other day, National Planning Authority was asking me, and I say, okay, for us we did, of course, we put some numbers from the other sectors in terms of the energy interface. But if we do, NPA is reading on the just energy transition, and I was telling them, you better get some good guys to do the job. So if you do for energy, you do for Aforo, you do for all the other sectors, then we can have the whole country with a good path. You have to force the country to go this way. Because we have to develop, but at the same time we have to minimize. So for us, we have gone ahead, and other sectors should also do the same. Then we'll be. And if you extend this one, you reach by 2065 the net zero. Now, by net zero, every emissions we shall produce, we shall be able to abate. That's the net zero. So remove the zero emissions. It does not. You can achieve it, of course, if, for instance, you do. If your sector is like transport, and like your car, what car do you have? You don't have a car. You ride an electric motorcycle. So you can say you are on zero emissions in terms of your transport. Eh? Then if I take you back, I say your cooking method. What are you using to cook? Then I can check your tires. How are they produced? But you can say in terms of your transport, you have zero emissions. But as a whole of you try to make sure that if you produce more emissions here, you abate them here, then you can say you've achieved a net zero as a person. I think that's it, isn't it? Thank you very much. Did you want me to close or me have closed? Do you know
Yes, please do the closure of the owners to close.
Let Honorable
Doctor,
Pascal fine, yeah.
I'm really sorry, but the meeting, I think, I just want to throw some clarification on the meeting with the minister. Any moment I want to meet the minister, certainly I'll find she's always in Parliament. You know, when I knock on her door, she certainly is going to open the door.
No, I mean the technical one.
Yeah, no, but you see, there is a consultant in the room, and there is SEATINI. These people have a huge body of knowledge, and I want us as a country to tap into at a top leadership level, and that's the reason why I was saying the consultant and the leadership of SEATINI should work out a meeting with the minister. And the conclusion of all of that would just having this presentation, the president to benefit from the presentation. I know that there's quite a lot that he's going to pick from the presentation or from the consultant.
No problem, no problem. I need to, I only read the concept. You said me, but the first person to absorb the knowledge is me. Is me and my.
They're going to work. work
Me
it
and
out
my
with
colleagues,
you.
I am the chief technical advisor of the ministry.
Super.
So even if you went to them, they would say first.
Yeah.
And whatever you produce, that's what I was saying. I like SEATINI. I think I'm always there. If the work done is contributing, for instance, to review of the AMV, depending on the subject, then I can easily assemble our colleagues so that we can receive an input from you. Yeah, because you are the one who knows. You discuss with the pen. You know we are doing this, and I think it can be useful on this particular one. Just let me know, then I assemble. I expected Agnes Alaba to be here. I'm sure she's committed somewhere. The key thing is first to discuss with the guys who need the knowledge first. So that the laws we bring out, the standards, the regulations, the licensing procedures benefit from that knowledge, isn't it? The reviews. So first, and then of course we always credit. We can have a meeting with the minister, just say, these people have contributed this value and this, and she also appreciate. So that also if tomorrow you are inviting her, she comes very easily. But just to know, you are highly respected. I can tell you that. No, and that's why the PS saw it and said, no, Gerard, please go there. And so I think SEATINI, there's another group of CSO, which are, and you have been very good. You have been very good. So keep doing up the work. Okay, is that all? On that basis, I think I wish to thank you for inviting us and thank everybody's participation. Please submit the report to the relevant bodies. I think the Minister of Water and Environment, the Minister of Energy, Finance, so that they can incorporate these in our works. And wish to have our meeting closed. Thank you.